Mr. Ross.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this night, Lord. We pray that we would have wisdom as a board. We pray for those that are mourning in Spotsylvania County, the state, and our nation, Lord, and we know you're the great physician and the great healer, and we ask you to heal those that are hurting as only you can in Spotsylvania, in our state, and in our nation. Again, Lord, please give us wisdom tonight, and thank you for your forgiveness of all of our sins. In your name we pray. Amen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. First item is approval of your agenda, and there are no items in the bullpen.
Do you want to have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Dr. Trampy. Mr. Yakubowski.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner. Aye. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Trampy.
Aye.
Chair's aye.
Next are public presentations. Amy, has anyone signed up?
Yes, sir.
If I may, I'll review public presentation guidelines. Public presentations are an opportunity for citizens to present matters you believe deserve the board's attention. These presentations are not part of a public hearing. Sign up for each public hearing is separate. Public presentations are one-way comments from citizens to the Board of Supervisors. This is not a forum for dialogue or debate. To make a public presentation, please sign up on the sign-up sheet that's provided, and please print clearly. Come to the lectern when your name is called. Clearly state your name and voting district for the record, and address your comments directly to the board. State whether you're speaking on your own behalf, in which case you'll have 3 minutes, or speaking on behalf of a group, in which case you'll have 5 minutes. In either event, a yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds to sum up, and the microphone will go off when your time has expired and the light comes red. Public presentations shall not be used to address matters subject to public hearings or to make political campaign speeches, private advertisements, or personal attacks, and your written comments are always welcomed by the Board of Supervisors. Amy, who has signed up.
Gil So, followed by Michael Obick.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Gil So. I reside in the Berkeley District. And tonight I'd like to deal with an issue that I consider to be an inequity. And so I'd like you to at least be aware that I'm reading off of page 18 of the county administrator's budget. And it's a concern where, again, the recommendation is being made to add or reduce boat owners' taxes, personal property taxes, by another 3 cents. I'm here to consider that as an inequity because, again, we have young people who are currently serving our country. At the same time that we're doing this for boat owners, we're sending bills twice a year to our young people who have personal property, because most of them, as they graduate and go into the military, the first thing they buy are wheels, generally a car, a truck, and/or a motorcycle to get where they need to be. And so when we look at what we're providing for a special interest group, specifically concerns me, because, again, our young people. So for every penny that comes out of this, $60,000 are removed from your revenue base. And when you look at what has been done over a number of years, 5 almost, $1.8 million is already out. And so I think, given the fact that we need to honor our young people who are willing to serve their country, I think we should honor that commitment by eliminating personal property taxes for them. I know it's a special consideration. I don't have the demographics. I have spoken to my representative, and I would hope that you'd get the demographics and we could discuss that, because I think it's an inequity for our young people. Thank you for your time.
Michael Obick.
My name is Michael O'Beer. I'm in Chancellor District. This is about the Spotsylvania solar field, especially Gate 1, which is proposed to become on Chancellor Meadows Lane. And the reason I oppose it is because there are 6 school-aged children that get on the bus on both sides of Chancellor Meadows Lane. 2 go to elementary, 2 go to middle, and 2 go to Spotsylvania High. And it'd be a health hazard for the kids to be coming on and off the school bus at the same time that the construction traffic is proposed to be coming into the solar field. And I think it should be changed to a piece of property that will be sold to the solar company on approval of the plans. But like granted, so right now it's just a proposed drawing, but I think you should be aware that it is going to be a health hazard for the children who come back and forth to school. Thank you.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody else that did not sign up that wishes to speak now? Close public presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, hold on.
Hey, I'd just like to ask Carl a question. Can this board exempt military from personal property tax, or is that a state issue?
It may be something that we're required to get authority from the General Assembly on. We'll certainly take a look at that if you'd like. If you'd like me to provide you that information, I'd be happy to.
Please do.
Sure.
I know the first thing I did when I joined the military was change my residency to a state that I was in at the time, Florida, because the state I was in, Iowa, charged me $50 a month to have that privilege of being from Iowa.
Mr. Chairman.
Brings us to the approval of your consent agenda. May I have the floor computer, please? Tonight's consent agenda is as follows. Number 1 is approval of the minutes for the January 23rd, 2018 board meeting. Number 2 is accept and approve a budget amendment for the 2018 Virginia Department of Health Child Safety Seat Check Station Coordinator Grant Award. This is a $17,000 grant with no local match and with the option for additional 4 annual renewals. Item 3 is the appointment of Mr. Burton Bigany Jr. to the Building Code Board of Appeals for a term that expires 12/31 of 19. Item 4 is a conversion of FREM positions for 24/7 ALS supervision at a cost not to exceed $10,000 and to be expended from currently budgeted funds. And item 5 is the approval of a resolution of support for the implementation of an unmanned aircraft system, drone system. This is an application for certification for a grant by the Sheriff's Office, and it is identifying partner agencies to work with the Sheriff's Office of Caroline, Louisa, and Orange counties, and our own Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services. And that is your consent agenda.
Would any of the board members want to remove one of the items? Seeing no one? Do you have a motion? Mr. Skinner, motion to approve the, oh, shoot, the consent agenda. Mr. Yakubowski.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
McLaughlin. Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Trampy.
Aye.
Chair, aye.
Mr. Chair, that brings us to board reports.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Nothing this evening.
Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Ross.
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Skinner.
Mr. Chair, one quick thing. I will not be at the March 13th meeting, so I would like to call in for that and just give whoever needs to know, county administrator, if we could set that up for me, please. And also check with the schools. That's the night you meet with the schools, and if there's any handouts that they have at that time, and we talked to them last time, but if I could get it by, I believe, the 9th, that's a Friday, I'd appreciate it very much. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Marshall.
I would like to get county staff, if we could, to go ahead and get the demographics on how many military personnel we have paying personal property tax in the county, if that information's available, so we can have some numbers to look at.
We'll do our best.
Well, I appreciate it.
Dr. Trampy.
No report.
Chair, no report.
Brings us to public hearings, Mr. Chairman. We have CA 18-0001. This is a zoning amendment related to notices and public hearings. Ordinance number 23-175. Good evening, Wanda.
Good evening. The item before you this evening is an ordinance amendment to 2 sections of the zoning ordinance. It's both part of the comprehensive zoning ordinance update, and also it implements board direction from the fall to increase opportunities for community awareness of zoning application and opportunities for input. We've done a number of updates to our website to include more information on applications and their status, getting information out via social media, increase the community meeting radius for mailings, and this will further implement that with a change to code. The Planning Commission reviewed this item and recommends approval 7-0. The items that are covered in this code amendment are related to newspaper advertisements. They run 2 times for zoning public hearings, and it amends the wording to be consistent with the Code of Virginia. The ads published 2 times between 21 and 5 days prior to the hearing, with at least 6 days between the ads. So basically, we're running the ads the week prior and then the week prior to that for each public hearing. The mailed notice is brought up to the 3,000-foot radius in the code. This is based on the board direction at the end of November. And then there are other grammatical edits and rewording for clarity consistent with the comprehensive zoning ordinance update that you've been seeing through a number of public hearings over the last couple of years. So staff is recommending approval, and I'm available for any questions.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Skinner?
I know the one that we talked about was did we go from 2,000 feet, the mailings, to 3,000?
3,000, yes, and that was in the community meeting policy.
Right.
So that's been implemented.
Okay.
And this would bring the county's official notice for the public hearings to that 3,000 feet as well.
I'm going to bring up an idea. The 3,000 feet I think is important, but the question is for like a Livingston area, what's the extra 1,000 feet do? And I'm not saying we break it up by zones, but you know, in my district in Lee's Hill, where we within that 1,000 extra foot, we got quite a few extra homes, and that's we're looking at half a mile now instead of roughly a third of a mile. And does this help? Does this help like a Livingston area? Is when you have such a rural area out there, and how many houses you have, and then in a what? I guess a third of a mile, not even that, a sixth of a mile is what we've increased it to, basically. You know, I don't know if that's something that you want to talk about or not. I mean, it's certainly affecting us and helping us, because I think more of that, does that really help you? And I'm not sure how we could say it any other way, to be honest with you. You know, other than looking at the homes in a certain district when the density is high, like it is for Battlefield or myself, and some areas for you, but not much. But in areas where the density isn't really big, how do we help those people to get notified of certain things?
Well, I would hope that the other items that were implemented, with the items being available on the website, we now have a map available so people can navigate via a map to look at the applications that are pending. We've got the application materials themselves out there on the web. We're putting notices out through Nextdoor and through Facebook, and then the newspaper advertisements. So the notices are getting out there now in many more ways than they were in the past. So word of mouth, so there are multiple ways that they're being announced. So hopefully that will cover the majority of people that are interested.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
All right. Anybody like to make a motion on this?
Motion to approve.
Need to open the public hearing,
Oh,
please, Mr.
I
Chairman?
apologize.
And Wanda, as we do, Mr. Chairman, could we check do you have it? We're good. Okay. Sorry, we had a technical difficulty there for a moment, but please, public hearing?
I apologize. Can we open up public, you want public comment? Do you have anybody signed up, Amy?
No, sir.
Anybody that did not sign up for the public hearing wish to speak now? Close public hearing presentations or comments.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve by Mr. Ross. Mr. Yakubowski.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Trampy.
Aye.
And Chair is aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Wanda. Next, I see Jeremiah Hansen is here, and it is the Citizen Budget Review Committee's budget presentation to the Board of Supervisors.
All right, thank you. This is the CBCR report related to proposed budgets for the county and schools for FY19. I'm joined here with Greg Bell, who's the vice chair of the CBRC, and Catherine Dennis, who is the secretary. As the slide says, I'm Jeremiah Hanson. I'm the CBRC chair. All right. The CBRC has spent the past year, since our last budget review presentation a year ago, working through the county and school budgets for FY18. This was mostly as an exercise to familiarize ourselves and to actually ask a lot of the little questions that jump out at you, but you don't know the answers. It also allowed us to have a lot of good, extensive discussions with both county and school administrations and clear up a lot of any misunderstandings, acronyms, and all the other things. This practice allowed us to look at the budgets in context rather than a massive collection of numbers, which is easy to do given the number of pages. However, we still have the issue that bylaws require our reports of efficiencies to include financial impacts, which is time prohibitive in the two-week window we have from the delivery of the budgets to our report, which is today. So what we're doing here is a little bit different than before. This presentation is about things we've been doing up to this point and questions and things that have been spawned from going through the budget and what we're planning on doing over the near term. This ensures that we can quantify the financial impacts properly and that it fits within county and school priorities, which is in line with the CBRC bylaws. Often there are discussions on the side of or as a result of meetings for discussions that take more time to work through. You can't answer everything up front. This is based off a discussion I've been having with Mark Taylor, trying to determine if there's another way the county can look at the information that it has to respond quickly to funding needs and to monitor how well it's doing its job. If you look in the county budgets, I think it's around page 300. For about 100 pages, there's a series of measures that are in there. And I believe a lot of these numbers could come out of this. And this is part of a back and forth discussion that we're having. Metrics, it's based on my experience as an engineer with perspective looking to catch issues before they become urgent or before you actually have to work on them because it's already happened. So metrics in this case provide the administrator of a department insight into how the department is operating. Metrics have to be chosen to be outside temporary concerns, i.e. the day-to-day operations, and track for some time to determine the trends. These trends can help manage many facets often resident in any of the county business models. An example I suggested to Mark is looking at the available square footage to an employee and comparing that to the area needed for the employee to do their job well and efficiently. The employee can probably do the job with less. It's important to detect when that employee is no longer being as efficient as it's seen an increased cost. So if the drops below a certain level, your employee may take longer time to accomplish the task, which is otherwise invisible in their day-to-day operations. Additionally, we did ask a question, and the county does have an incentive program for employees who suggest and or lead cost savings measures. It's an excellent program that helps the county improve its operation from those who are most intimate with the operations of the county and the county's needs. These are two previous recommendations that I want to provide updates to the board. The county has non-specific goals to attempt, and this is related to the first one, has non-specific goals to attempt to reduce costs prior to adding additional costs to the budget. The self-policing should help reduce budgetary bloat. The county also already works to reduce long-term costs through the use of leftover funds. This might mean covering a SIP project with cash instead of using bonds. It might also mean purchasing more efficient hardware. The needs of the county and the amount available determine how the county utilizes those funds. I think there's been a wide variety over the last couple of years. These were a series of recommendations I provided to the county based off of tours of both the school and county maintenance facilities. The county has responded to these recommendations by providing information on a program called CityWorks being utilized between the utilities and the Public Works Department. The system is more useful for utilities and creates life histories of assets that are in place in the field. The examples they gave are fire hydrants or valves and things that you put out there in hardware. Included in this deployment is also a storeroom module, which is intended to be applied in the maintenance department the next few years. The eventual plan is to employ the storeroom program to include barcode scanning of all inventory control. In the meantime, staff will review current manual inventory control features and look for improvements. One of the things I found was that a lot of those were paper inventory sheets, among others, and no inventory and various things. And so this is an update to that information. During the tours, I was also surprised to learn that there are no security cameras around the facilities at either school or county maintenance facilities. There are large collections of equipment, materials, and vehicles that represent large investments by the county and the schools. It's worth the county's and schools' investment to protect them, in the case of damage or theft, to prosecute the perpetrators. CBRC has started working with Mary and Jane to determine a reasonable price point to balance the need to protect county investments and to keep costs low. This will be an ongoing discussion as the project will require determination of financial impact and what amount of risk this reduces to the county and schools, if you can even quantify such a thing. I'm sure there's a way. I'm just not sure of it right now. These are a series of county questions that we asked related to the FY19 budget. Each of these have been answered or are part of a work in progress. The first two are actually coupled. The Economic Opportunities Reserve and the Economic Development Opportunities Fund are both used to incentivize companies to locate in Spotsylvania. The Economic Opportunities Reserve has been used lately to incentivize 6 companies between FY18 and FY19, including Lidl, among others. The third item on this list is part of the previous slide and is ongoing discussion with the county. It will take time to work up a cost-effective method to improve security at the maintenance facilities and to provide economic impact to the budget as well as risk reduction to the county. The fourth item has the county is switching to a new provider of GPS units for tracking vehicles. The previous system and the transition had resulted in some GPS units not functioning, which is why the question was asked. That has been remedied, and over 70% of the fleet is currently tracked. The remainder of the vehicles are planned to be phased in over the next year or two, I think. There were a list of some reports of fuel-related issues. After discussion with the county, the system seems to be working efficiently, but they did say they continue to monitor it on a daily basis. These are some of the questions that came out of looking at the school budget. The first one is actually dependent on looking between the county budget and the school budget, and where it was noticed. The difference between the school food service and the county and school budgets breaks down along categorization lines. The information on page 38 in the school budget does not include maintenance budget categories, which is captured on page 79 and in the county budget allocation. So that's where the disconnect was, which is what we had expected based off previous discussions over the past year. We wanted to get clarification as to the increase of 16 regular education teachers, and the reasoning is to reduce classroom sizes, primarily in the K through 3 range of classes. It's partly in response to a governor's initiative to reduce the class sizes for K through 3 to 23 students to 1 teacher, vice the current 24 to 1, which is roughly the average from Spotsylvania schools. This is partly due to an increase of an expected 304 students from FY16 through FY19. We don't have what grade ranges they are, but that's part of the reasoning. The cost of providing a 2% COLA to administrative positions, which include directors, supervisors, principals, assistant principals, among others, totals approximately $300,000. Question 4 is still an open question. It was in response to discussion at the CBRC meeting in February 22. February 22nd. We'll update it when we actually have that information available. And we had asked how many gifted resource teachers were employed in response to a single one that was being added as part part of the school budget, and they said there were 20 current gifted resource teachers in the school system. During the discussion, there was a question asked about what the ratio of the administrators to the students were compared to the state. The response was, as of FY16, Spotsylvania ranks 128 out of 132 school systems in Virginia, with 2.91 administrators per 1,000 students. And that's based off the latest numbers that they had available. Once a retiree, this is in relation to number 7. Once a retiree qualifies for Medicare, Spotsylvania County Public Schools retirees are eligible for a supplemental Medicare plan at $117 per month. The retiree pays $36.30 per month, and the school system pays $80.70 per month. The estimated cost is $651,000 per year. Prescription drugs for pre-Medicare retirees are incorporated in the regular monthly health insurance premium. Sorry, there is also a typo on the slide that I didn't catch. 8 and 9 are all one. Retirees eligible for Medicare are offered a separate Medicare supplemental plan, which is 100% paid by the school system with an annual cost of $1.1 million. Like I said, 8 and 9 are together. This comment is related to that one. I apologize for, oh, it's fine on the slide, not on my sheet. I don't know how that happened. It's nearly a 10% increase on the line item, which is listed as on page 70. It's listed as function 6820, technology instruction support. And it came out to be a difference of $427,474. And it's due to adding 8 FTEs, which is listed on page 49, plus compensation increases allocated to other existing technology instructional support staff at a cost of $108,386. This is the end of the CBRC presentation related to FY19 budget. I noted no recommendations related to the budget proper. The CBRC feels its efforts are going to be most impactful by working with the county and school administrations over the course of the year. This interaction reduces confusion and ensures the dialogue between all parties takes as many things into account as possible. The areas CBRC will be looking at next are looking at the Department of Social Services with a tour in the near term plus a discussion on their operation. An additional area that would be worth looking at are the CIP budgets, plans, and operations to see how those are being executed and see if there's any efficiencies that could be done there. I would like to close with a consideration for this budget cycle. There are many things that didn't make it into the budget, and most of them have very good reasons to be added back in with a higher than normalization tax rate. Some of the positions that are desired but not funded add to the yearly cost of the county, and all future work must be covered by taxes in addition to those recurring costs. For example, the CBRC has heard over the past year needs of new schools in the near-ish future without a very specific timeline. Any future building projects like schools will add substantial debt and necessary taxes to the then current tax rate. We need to be mindful of the future costs and plan accordingly for them, including planning with the future tax rate in mind. It's probably obvious to the most casual observer, but I wanted to make sure I closed with some observations on the current rates. All right, thank you.
Comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McClellan.
I'm going off some of your questions, and some of them are really geared towards the staff here. So Mr. Taylor, I mean, that's a good point about cost-saving initiatives. And, working for the government, we have them all the time. They should cost initiatives. What are you doing to bring down the overall cost of your program? And same thing I'm gonna ask you or challenge you. What are we doing in the county? And again, this could apply to the schools as well. What are we doing looking across our budget, which is what, close to $500 million or so, to find savings or efficiencies? Whether it's, I think you mentioned something going from paper inventory systems to electronic inventory. Do we have any goals or plans in place now, or do we have any initiatives planned for cost saving or efficiencies?
Well, first of all, the biggest single strategy that we're in the midst of unfurling toward such goals, Mr. McLaughlin, in my mind, is the One Solution finance system implementation, the unified computer system for our operation, which will enable crosstalk or reconciliation between data sets in different departments. So it's a fundamental tool, but it'll allow us to track more effectively, for example, maintenance costs and the life cycle cost of vehicle ownership and other equipment ownership. So it's a large thing. The implementation goal is July 1st of 19, but that is primary project.
So that's one effort of hopefully many, but I guess let me maybe give you a chance to respond to this later. With the strategic planning coming up, this may be a good opportunity for you to suggest or recommend some cost-saving initiatives or strategies during that strategic plan, some things that we can focus on, whether it's an investment or something that we in the county are going to do or the schools are going to do to reduce the overall budget in the out years. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Happy to bring back some ideas.
That. Okay. And I think if you said something about the automotive joint maintenance, are you talking about the joint maintenance facility still doing paper documents or inventory? What was that? Could you explain that a little closer?
Our inventories, the One Solution system will integrate the data sets or allow us to talk between departments as to various data sets that we use. The joint fleet is in cooperation with the schools and that provides maintenance, but we have inventorying in the capital cycle on automobiles that are still resident in our budget. So integrating the holistic management of our fleet is a good goal, and a possible outcome or improvement in that area is possible through the One Solution tool.
Does that address that second bullet there under maintenance recommendations? I guess that's more towards you, Jeremiah. That second bullet, establish automated electronic inventory maintenance record.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
that's along the same lines.
Okay.
It's to give them a way of having everything under one area.
Could you one last thing? Could you explain 7 and 8 again? You lost me on that one.
Which slide?
Bullet 7 and 8 on the school questions.
Oh, 1 second. See if I can get back to it here. That one. What specifically are you asking about? About 7, 8, or my comment about an error on it?
Didn't you say they were kind of merged questions? It should have been one question or two, so just go through it one more time so I understand that.
Unfortunately, on my sheet, somewhere between the time I sent this and the time I printed this, I ended up with an extra line in here, so it says 8, 9, but there's only 8, and so I was in error about an error on the sheet. 7 is the cost related to the health and prescription drug coverage. That was the two comments about the cost of the supplemental Medicare plan costing the school system $651,000 per year. I guess that would mean the retirees are somewhere about half of that because it looks to be about a third and 2/3 payment. And then the drugs related to retirees eligible for Medicare, they're offered a separate Medicare supplemental plan, which is paid 100% by the school system, which has an annual cost of $1.1 million.
So I guess maybe that's I was keying on. So this $1.1 million cost, is that something we should be paying, or could you explain that a little closer?
This was due to the question is trying to quantify what those costs were. It varies a bit. Sometimes you see items in their weekly pay that have, so much prescription drug repayment costs, and so we were trying to figure out what that actual cost was. And the question was kind of two-part, whether or not is that covering all retirees? Is it covering just the Medicare retirees and that type of thing? I think Catherine is going to chime in here.
Okay, the original question came about because it said on retiree prescriptions, 1.1 million. If you look at their bill pay, it is apparent that they are refunding the cost of prescriptions to individuals. So I'm not sure if that was a practice that is no longer happening, and those are, the ones that were grandfathered in, or what we're waiting for clarification on that. but it's a tremendous amount of money that's being refunded. And
So-
I think that maybe if they were given a insurance policy to cover those drugs, it might save money.
Okay, but there's a response coming back from the schools on that?
Yes, we are waiting for a response on that. I mean, definitely there are, if you look at the bill pays, multiple, and it lists the individual's name and it's a refund. So they are probably submitting their claims to the school instead of to an insurance company, to the school board instead of an insurance company.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer your question?
For now, till you get the answer back.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? Mr. Yakubowski?
Thank you. So I read through your presentation, and I don't know, do you just not have enough time? Because according to your bylaws, you're supposed to present us with recommendations 2 weeks after the county administrator's budget. Is that just too short of a time to put something together?
To give a recommendation with the required financial impact statements, I don't think Mary, in all of her abilities, which are far exceed mine and the board's, would be able to do so. 2 weeks is a really short period of time, and I think the CBRC, as most effective, instead of burning ourselves out over 2 weeks trying to do the impossible, it's better to work over the course of the year so that as Mark and Dr. Baker, Mary, and LaShawn are sitting there working their budget numbers, we've already been covering that, and it's not anything that's new, and we can make it part of more of a conversation than a single impetus. It seems much more efficient, and it has worked very well this past year as a methodology.
So we're not going to get a report, is what you're saying?
I'm saying that our report is we don't have any recommendations at this time, but we will continue to work with both the school and the county to get it done.
Okay, my understanding of the CBRC was always that in that time, they take a look at the county administrator's recommended budget, and in that budget are increases over the previous year. So look at the increases and let us know if those increases are necessary or out of bounds or something that shouldn't be there. The rest of the year, I would assume, is the time that would be spent to take a look at the rest of the budget. I'll tell you, I'm a big advocate of the CBRC in the original format of what it was and how it was supposed to operate and what it was supposed to do. And I will tell you, gentlemen, that this is now 5 years, maybe 6 years of a CBRC that is really, I have not seen a dollar savings. There's a lot of, well, we could if we did this, and we could if we did that. But my question is, how much time, money, effort are we spending, and what are we getting? And it would seem to me that from what the CBRC has recommended to us, probably the best way to save money would be to disband the CBRC. We now televise their presentations, which are, I think, $800 per meeting. And I'll just tell you, I know that there's hundreds and literally hundreds and hundreds of questions that have gone to the schools, to the county, the time that is spent doing that, the time that is spent educating folks about what the budgets are. I'm not sure if we maybe need to put a timeline on it, because I don't see where the county is reaping the benefit of having a committee such as this that basically has unlimited ability to set up tours, get documents, put together, go through all of the information that is out there, dealing with staff time on the county side and the school side. And so I'm not sure at what point, because I will tell you, I'm just about at that point of I don't see the benefit for it anymore. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Ross?
I just want to thank you guys. I know you volunteer. I know it's all, you're not paid. And I know you've done a lot of work. And so it's greatly appreciated. I actually appreciate the questions that you asked tonight. I don't think, I've gone through the budget myself, and they're great questions that I would have not have thought of. So just getting those answers back and your time is greatly appreciated by me. So thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I want to point out as well, because I think what you do is very important, and I think it all goes back to transparency. Nobody in this county that spends $1 should be afraid of a citizen looking at your budget. You should encourage them. Please, come in. Look at my budget. I will show you every dollar I spent, how I spent it, and why I spent it. And we should be glad that you're there and proud that you're there and not put them down every opportunity that they can, okay? And if there's better ways to do it, don't just condemn them. Bring a solution forward, okay? Because I think they've done a lot of good. They point out things in the county. Let's get them out there, get them more engaged. Let's put more people on the CBRC. Let's get subcommittees to go out there in each one of the agencies and find things. Because that's our eyes and ears, those folks out there that look for things that we don't have time to go for. So I think you're doing a great job, and I'd like you to do more, right? I didn't have the time to look through all this budget either. We had it in 2 weeks. We got the budget on a Tuesday, we got the school's budget on Thursday, and we had to set a tax rate 2 days later. I think that's unacceptable as well, okay? You surely didn't have enough time to do a thorough review of the budget. So, and again, keep working on it, keep doing your job, and we'll get better. But again, it's about transparency. Keep doing the job you're doing. I like it on TV because it's a great opportunity for all the citizens to see what you're doing. And, you know, if they don't like it, they can email us, they can call us, or they can come in here and talk about whether they think that the few $100s a year you spend on televising is the wrong thing. But that's about transparency, and we need more of that, not less of it. So, again, keep up the good work, and I appreciate it.
I'll end by kind of letting on that one. I do appreciate what you do. I think it is vital for us to be very transparent and open to where we're spending our money and what we're doing with the taxpayers' monies. And I just thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, is there a better way of doing it? Yeah, there is a better way of doing it. This isn't working. If you truly believe that this is working, that here it is, according to our bylaws, it says that we're supposed to get a year-end report showing us the efficiencies, the savings, the actual things that we can do. Please show me in the reports, the last 5 of them, the savings. Transparency, fantastic, all for it. If it's only about transparency, then let's have 100 CBRCs that ask questions. But if you ask questions but you don't fix the problems or you don't find the problems, that is a whole nother issue. I would ask the county administrator to please let us know how much staff time is being spent, how many emails, how many tours have been had, and how much the cost is to televise CBRC meetings. Thank you.
Mr. Marshall, go ahead.
I'd like to add with one of the questions that you have here, if I could, with county staff. Number 4, what says, what career positions did the Evergreen study not cover or touch? Could we also add that information when that question's answered? Can we get that answered by the county also, not just the school system?
Yes, sir.
I believe we may have left some I don't think the Evergreen study covered some part-time positions within the county, and it may not have in the schools also. I want to see if we can look into that. Thank you.
Thank y'all very much. All right. Mr. Taylor, I think revisions to the Transportation Committee bylaws is next. I think
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Skinner wanted that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have my assistant clicker setting up here. And these are 2 initiatives that were put forth by board members here, so I'm just going to throw them up on the screen. You have the redlined proposed changes as part of your agenda. I have hard copies here. Floor computer. All right, these are the 2 initiatives to amend the Transportation Committee bylaws. Next slide, please. All right, the first initiative is from Mr. Skinner. The effect of this is to limit the number of board members who may serve on the Transportation Committee to just the 2 or 3 in the members of the board category. You can go to this next slide. Also, the change would prevent board members from serving as the chair, vice chair, or secretary. As I previously briefed the board, the effect of this would affect the appointment of Supervisor Ross being appointed back in January as the representative of the Cortland District. He was unanimously appointed in January. An option for the board to allow him to serve out his term is to simply make this effective January of 2019. I have a resolution prepared to do that if you so wish. With that, I turn it over to Supervisor Skinner and the board for discussion. And of course, we need a vote one way or the other to adopt this or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, the whole purpose is this was the bylaw said 2 to 3, and we found ourselves out there with 4 one evening with 4 supervisors sitting in there. And I first of all, the bottom line is each one of us up here is a supervisor. And if we want someone to represent our districts, I think that should be an appointee by us. If that's an alternate or something of that nature. I just, you know, as I said before, supervisor on these committees, we have people that come out, volunteer their time, number one. And so I think we're the resource that they go to. And that's why I'm saying if we allow, you know, it's a possibility that all 7 want to come to a transportation committee, supervisors, why have the committee to begin with? Because I think it's an input from the citizens that are out there, along with the help of our VDOT representatives with Dan and also Doug out there. And I just, you know, number one, I saw at least a question mark as far as we have 2 to 3 in our bylaws, and now we had 4. And as you said, I believe at that time, our chair thought that he was going to be, he thought he was representing his district, where actually he was on it as an appointee to the committee itself, Mr. McLaughlin himself. And then it was Mr. Ross and I that appointed ourselves, or asked to be appointed ourselves to that thing. The other thing I want to bring up too, I think it needs to be representative throughout the county. You need to have somebody on that committee. If it's going to be 3 supervisors, I'd like to see that the supervisors are spread out, or at least cover all 7. Somebody's attached to a, you know, if right now, if you take a look at it, if I step down, there would be nobody representing the Berkeley District, the Lee Hill District, or the Battlefield District. And we have some very important, as much as everybody else does throughout the county, to see what we can do to help our congestion on Route 1 and 17 and stuff of that nature. So, and I certainly, again, when it comes to being a chair, it says in the bylaws, I think the chair will make correspondence with everybody on that committee. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure supervisors have that extra time to make sure that just for that one committee, you're talking to all your committee members. So I think that may be unrealistically to believe, whereas a person like Doug or Dan or somebody who's the chair can make those calls for that. So it was a point that I brought out. I wanted to discuss it with the with our board here and hear what everybody else has to say.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Dr. Trappy?
Who is the current chair and vice chair of the committee?
I believe Dan Cole is I believe is the chair, correct? Who is the vice chair, Doug? Okay.
Dan Cole is the chair. I'm vice chair. Not. That's it.
So we have no secretary.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ross.
So just for clarification, Carl, we just adopted the bylaws for this committee in our last meeting? It was...
No, the bylaws were, I mean, the bylaws have been around for a while. They were readopted and moved into the board's bylaws back in at the organizational meeting in January.
In January. So right now, I would state that there is no chair, vice chair, or anything because you have to appoint them annually, correct?
That's usually the case, is that they are
internal to the committee.
Yeah, internal. That's usually the case. I'm not sure if that if those positions carry terms in the bylaws. I'd have to look quickly, but
I don't have the minutes with me from the last meeting.
Oh, but we didn't have a quorum. So
You didn't have a quorum,
we did
but
not,
it was
so-
brought up,
right.
so it was a discussion of the chair and vice chair.
Because we couldn't have a quorum because the bylaws require 9 members, and there's only 7 members that are appointed to it by the board. So
That
I think
probably
we-
gets to your
we're gonna
the
get
second
to that.
presentation
Right.
there, yeah.
So I think officially there, right now, to answer your question, is there is no chair, vice chair, or anything, because our first meeting, we didn't have a quorum, or to my knowledge.
There was a couple other meetings going on that night.
After the bylaws were adopted.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to confirm that. I do have here on the Transportation Committee that they shall annually elect. So it depends whenever was the last one, then if that was January of last year, then they may indeed not have one if they haven't gotten quorum yet.
Mr. McLaughlin?
So a couple things that, I don't want to restrict us, and that's one of the problems. Now, as a member of the Transportation Committee, I choose not to run for any of the leadership positions. Because I don't want to try not to influence the other membership, because you do want that input, but it's a good committee that brings input from VDOT and from the staff and from some of the citizens and from the other folks. So I think it's a good opportunity. But I also think it's important to have the board members that are part of FAMPO on that planning commission. So if you're going to restrict it, make sure it's your FAMPO members, because they're bringing that piece from the regional planning and transportation to the local that helps feed our decision-making. So I really don't agree with this. I don't know that it's broken. I would maybe let it go as it is for a while and see where we're at, and maybe if we have to readdress it in the future. But I don't know that we need to make all these changes right now, because I don't think it's not working properly.
Anybody else?
Quick
Mr.
question. Do we have any vacancies on that committee as far as citizen representatives? I know my citizen representative, he contacted me. He couldn't make the last meeting, but he followed the rules and contacted his supervisor. But I don't know, how many vacancies do we have? Is there, 'cause you need 9, you say you need 7 for a quorum, it's 9?
I think we're going to, Mr. Chair, I think we're going to talk about that tonight, because it's 9 by the book, but I think we're going to reduce, that's another thing that's on our agenda, to discuss another change to the bylaws to make it something less than that. But I don't know if, do you guys have a list of who's the vacant spots for each district?
We do have a list. Basically, we have representatives of Battlefield District, the Berkeley District, and then we have the board members from Livingston, Cortland, and Lee Hill. And that's it. So we have quite a few vacancies.
Berkeley's been filled.
Yeah, Berkeley's, Mr. Sean Hockley's my representative on the Transportation Committee.
Who is that?
Sean Hockley?
Yes,
Yeah,
did I not mention him? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He should be, you said Berkeley was one of the vacancies. It's not a vacancy.
No, it's actually, Livingston and Cortland, I guess, but they're represented by board members, so.
Well, Carl, do you have that list? Because I know I'm filling the Cortland position.
That's correct. I don't have the list with me.
And I believe Mr. Skinner is not filling the Lee Hill, and the Lee Hill is vacant.
Correct. In reviewing everything, the board members who are filling out the 2 to 3 board member positions based on what's been adopted previously are Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Benton as board members, and also Gary's appointment last year was in fact to fill out the 2 to 3 positions there, and he was then reappointed in January, so he would fill that 3rd board member slot. Again, the only affected member on the committee currently would be you, Mr. Ross, as being appointed as the Cortland District representative.
Technically, right now, we only have 8 members on the board, unless you count staff and VDOT, so.
Yeah, when I checked last, when my informal count was also 8, adding Mr. Hockaday on there. That's very informal. Please don't take that as gospel.
May I ask a question, please?
Skinner.
Thank you. So, Dan, hang on. So right now, so I understand that since I was appointed to that commission, does that mean I can still appoint a representative from the Lee Hill District to that?
You can nominate somebody from Lee Hill District. The board as a whole appoints each member, but yes.
But
the
what
practice,
I'm saying is, at that meeting, because I have someone who wants to go on the Transportation Committee, and I'd be happy to put them on there. So what you're saying is there'd be two people, myself and that representative at the meeting with voting authority?
That's the way it stands
Yes.
currently, yes. You're one of the 2 to 3 members of the board, and you can appoint somebody from the Lee Hill, I'm sorry, you can nominate somebody from the Lee Hill District. The board as a whole would have to confirm that nomination and actually appoint the member.
All right, thank you. I will have that nomination by the next meeting.
Okay, great.
Any other questions or concerns?
Well, I guess the bottom line is this, these call for 2 to 3 members, 2 to 3 supervisors, okay? And right now, if all 4 of us stay on it, we're not abiding by the resolution or whatever we have here.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Ross.
I'll just defer to Carl. Would you explain that to Mr. Skinner, please?
My reading of the bylaws, when, Mr. Ross, when you were considering the appointment as the Cortland District Representative, my reading of the bylaws is that the bylaws did not exclude board members from serving as that election district representative. I think Mr. Skinner is speaking more to the intent, and obviously what he's proposed here is to give effect to what he believes is the intent of the board. But currently, I haven't identified a legal issue, according to my reading of the Transportation Committee bylaws, with your appointment currently. Obviously, if the board adopts this, that would affect your appointment.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Ross.
are there other committees that limit a supervisor from appointing him or herself to the committee?
I don't know of any, but each of the committees are different. There may be some language in there that could be interpreted that way, but to my knowledge, there's nothing that is this explicit to make that limitation. To my knowledge.
Any other questions, concerns?
The point is, we either change it and say that supervisors are unlimited on any committee they want to be on. They can appoint themselves. I mean, if that's what you want to do. I mean, I really believe that the supervisors here is a resource for our citizens because they don't get all the background, they don't get all the information that's provided to us when we pick up the phone and we ask somebody in the staff to give us this information. And I do not want, I'm sorry, but there are a lot of citizens out to do it because there's other citizens and they feel good to talk about it. And having 4 or 5 supervisors sitting around or 3 supervisors, whatever it might be, is just not, I don't think that's what we intended to be. We intended to go out and get citizens' inputs and then take their recommendations and talk about it or vote on them, stuff of that nature. I mean, one thing we have to do, one way or the other, whatever you say, we've got to change at least 2 to 3. What you're saying is, as long as we can appoint ourselves as that district representative, then that's not the role of the supervisor? I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. You are a supervisor. All 7 of us was elected. People know us as supervisors, and we just have to, clarify this language that we got in there. I'm sure, like Carl said, there's no way we can go back and find it, but I don't want this to get out of control, and I don't think it's going to get out of control, but I do think I want people who are willing to come to a meeting, give their time, work as a volunteer, and give us good things, and use us as a resource. And I would hope that a representative on these boards, at least so that all 7 areas are each attached, somebody like that. A good example is right now, if I stepped off this board, there'd be nobody here on that transportation committee to represent the Berkeley, the Battlefield, Lee Hill District. And we've got just as many growing problems and working on it ourselves to make sure that we're involved in this transportation committee.
Mr. Ross?
I'm just a little confused because you can appoint somebody to represent, and nobody's asking you to step down. I don't think there's a problem. I know I've had many people that have been on this board and they resign because they don't have the time to do it, and it is a very important one with me being on FAMPO, and I feel it's good for me to be on, but I don't know if you thought you were the Lee Hill appointee before this or not, but right now you don't have anybody, and if there's somebody that's not representing Battlefield, that person could be appointed too. I don't know the other, you keep saying the Lee Hill, Battlefield, and Berkeley, but I think Berkeley has an appointee that's coming on it, so I'm not sure what the...
I have an appointee.
Yeah,
he's
so-
been there.
And I'm not saying as the appointees. I'm saying, you know, let's face it, there's a different situation when you sit there as a supervisor and trying to just be a resource. I understand what you're saying. And yes, I have an appointee that I will present to this board at our next meeting. At least it'll be in the, hopefully it'll be in the consent agenda. I will not be here, but you will all get his resumes, maybe a couple other ones too. But, you know, that's fine as long as we clarify that people who are there, whether you're there as the appointee or as a representative of your district. And I would hope that as a supervisor, if it came down to me being one, if there's only one, I would let my representative that I select to be my appointee there, rather than being on as a supervisor. I've got enough duties as it is, not, you know, as far as being part of a committee.
All right. Mr. Yakubowski.
Thanks. I just have one thing. I was just looking at the bylaws of the Transportation Committee and what the purpose of it is, and I know it used to, and does it still have a representative from the school system on there? Okay, and so it's supposed to be a collaborative effort to get information back to this board and recommendations, so you can talk the details at that level and go back and forth at it, and then bring the final product up to us, where we might not have the time to go through all of that. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Skinner. I'm not sure why we are stacking them with board members, because we're stacked with board members here. So our committees should actually be a subset of our board, couple board members, and then other stakeholders that are necessary for whatever issue it might be. I know my representative is the former VDOT district guy, I think. It's been a while, but long time ago he was that. And he brings that knowledge and that expertise, and also where he lives, and he knows the sort of the background, but he also brings the perspective of a citizen and the issues that come up with transportation. So I was always hoping that it would just be a couple board members, more citizens, more stakeholders being represented, and then they bring the issues forward. So I think stacking it with too many supervisors, it just defeats the purpose.
Somebody going to make a motion, or what do we want to do with this?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Skinner.
As it lies right now, and I'm going to ask the county attorney, there's really nothing wrong with what we're doing, other than if we feel it's right or wrong. But legally, as Mr. Ross said, he can be the he can be the representative from his district. That is correct.
Currently, yes.
Okay.
Again, that changes if this resolution and this
No,
changes.
I'll tell you what. That's fine. I've said my intent here. What I think is important, and obviously, not everybody agrees with that, and so I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it up to the individual supervisor to whether he wants to take that position or not, or offer it to one of his constituents. So there's nothing much we can do, and I doubt very seriously if it would pass tonight if I said just limit it to 2 to 3 supervisors and keep a supervisor in this chair and not in another committee's chair. So.
Mr. Taylor, we can move on.
All right, that brings us to our second initiative. This is Mr. Ross's initiative, which he previously alluded to. Floor computer, please, if you can bring that up. This is to address the quorum of the Transportation Committee. Currently, it requires 9 members to conduct formal business as a quorum. My understanding, per Mr. Ross, and again, he mentioned that earlier, that from time to time, or maybe often, the Transportation Committee has trouble getting a quorum there of 9 members.
Carl, that's not the issue. Right now, there's only 8 members.
Okay.
That are appointed by this board, and that's with the addition of our last one. At their last meeting that we had, there were only 7 members that had been appointed by the board. So it's not even having everybody there. That's not the issue. The issue is, at our last meeting, only 7 people had been appointed by this board to be on that committee, so you can't get 9 when you have 7 total.
Even more of a reason, yes. So what this does, the change defines a quorum simply as a majority of the appointed members of the Transportation Committee at the time of the meeting. It clarifies any appointments which are not filled or characterized as vacant shall not be counted when determining a quorum. So if there are 8 members currently, then that would be a quorum of 5. If there are 7, again, quorum of 4. That would be the effect of this change. So with that, I would turn that over to Mr. Ross and the board for discussion and consideration.
Yes, the only thing I have, Mr. Chair, is what I just said. You can't have a quorum right now until you would have 9 members appointed, and right now my understanding is that we only have 8. But at the last time we had 7, so we're gaining that momentum. So I think this change makes sense.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say one thing. Can we do this, Mr. Ross, if you don't mind? Can we go ahead and see what's appointed at the next meeting and then hold this off to you until we see?
I don't think it makes any sense to do that, Mr. Skinner.
Well, if we have the people that we originally planned for this committee to be and we have the appointees.
Mr. Chair, just
Mr. McClellan.
When's the next meeting, transportation meeting?
Hold on.
I think it's March 13th, but let me.
That's fine.
I have it as the 8th.
But even so, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ross?
So I'm just saying that, and Mr. Skinner, so if we had, normally a quorum's defined by a majority. So if you have 8 members, a quorum's normally defined as 4. Either half, or if you have 7 members, it's still defined as 4, correct?
It's usually defined as a majority, so if you have 8, that would mean 5. If you have 7, 4.
So all I'm saying is, it looks to me that the total, if you read the bylaws, that we would need to have appointed to have 9 would be 19, right? So there must be 19 possible positions on the Transportation Committee. Would that be? I'm just saying, if a quorum is defined by 9 members, and normally a quorum is defined as a majority, then you have to have at least 18 positions, and the way you just defined it would be 19 positions.
17. You would need 17 because half of 18 is 9, so you would need to have a majority, so it'd be 7. You would need 17 appointees for a majority of 9.
Of 9. So I don't think we're going to get there by next month, or probably 2 months from now, so that's why I'm recommending we vote on this tonight.
You want to make a motion?
Without further discussion, yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Ross. Mr. Yakubowski?
Excuse me, discuss. Just want to clarify, what are we voting on? Again, what is the motion then? Please, is to make a member, please explain.
We're making the quorum, what Carl said, the majority.
A majority of the appointed members at the time of the meeting. So whatever that number is, it would need to be a majority. So again, if there's 8 members, it would be 5. That's currently. If there's more people appointed, it would be whatever the majority is, which is 1 more than half.
All right, Mr. McLaughlin?
And that is appointed, not in attendance.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's appointed,
Right.
so it's whoever's appointed.
All right, Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I forgot where we were on it.
Yeah, you didn't call me Mr. Skinner, so that's a
Yeah, I
start.
know. That's, now you've jinxed me. Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Dr. Trampy?
Aye.
Chair's aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all we have there.
I think we're moving to capital improvement, capital projects.
Yes, sir. Mr. Petrovich and several departments have information to share.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We're here this evening to give you status updates on several of the CIP projects. Some of the CIP projects already are currently funded. Some of them are funded but looking for new funding or additional funding with the upcoming CIP. So we're going to start off with the capital projects under the Department of Public Utilities and Public Works with Mr. Loveday. And then we've got Mr. Brooks here to go over some of the Parks and Recs projects.
All right, good evening. We've taken the presentation we did back in September and kept some of those projects in there as kind of continuity to give you an idea of where we're at, and have added some additional projects in based on the budget and the budget development. First of all, starting off tonight, once again, it's just a reminder, as we discussed at the last meeting, that market conditions are good for construction contractors right now, so we're seeing higher prices in terms of the bids that we're receiving, and that is anticipated to be continual for the next few years, pending anything in the economy happening that would change that. So just something to factor in the back of your minds as you evaluate these projects and future projects. We'll start off tonight with the animal shelter expansion. That was the 11,000 square foot addition to the existing facility and a renovation of the existing 8,000 square foot facility. Had security updates. Right now, we're at 95% design plans. They're actually under the building department's review right now, and pending approval of those plans will be prepared for bidding. Pending any changes, we'll be hopefully in the bidding cycle starting April 2018, and then go through contract award with an 18-month construction process. This is the latest rendering of the facility. What you're looking at is if you were looking toward the expansion portion, so the existing facility is actually on the right-hand side with the expansion being on the left. I want to give you an idea of what the actual facility looks like inside. You'll have two slides here. This actually shows the expansion basically constructed on the existing facility. We did that because basically the way we're bidding this is, we'll get a total bid price, but we'll have a base bid for the expansion and then also a base bid for the renovation. So it gives us some more leeway when we're dealing with the contractors in terms of negotiation or potential cost savings as we work through that bidding process. And to give you an idea, when you look at both of these facilities, the overall canine kennel counts go up about 20, and then the cat housing, cat cages go about the same amount, about 20 cages, in addition to the support space. This is the bid alternate, which includes the renovation to the existing facility. Basically working with animal control and the shelter staff and with the architects, this basically represents the highest and best use of that renovated facility. Accounts for several things that we have to do per VDAC requirements. Basically within the circle, you'll see that the items 2 and 3 within that are mandated. We have to do those improvements in order to meet the current codes in terms of intake of canines and felines into the facility. So regardless of what happens in the bidding process and where we fall in budget line items, those items in that circle, number 2 and number 3, have to be done in some form to meet code. Give you an idea, rough idea of what is being added as part of those 2 projects, or two items. The animal housing within the expansion, they wanted to go to a larger kennel size, which is the current industry standard that goes basically from a 4x6 to a 6x6 space. It adds 3 visitation rooms where basically, if you're interested in adopting an animal, you come in and they can bring the animal in and you actually have a interaction with them, or is a court case dog or another animal where they can't leave the facility but the owner can still see them, they bring them into those visitation rooms. 4 real life rooms. This is basically rooms that are set up not unlike a living room or some facility like that, residential setting where the animals can be more, basically somebody can go in and they could play with 3 or 4 or 5 cats, whatever the shelter decides to put in there for that day. And it kind of gives them more of an idea of what it's like to be in the residential environment versus being actually in the cages or in the kennels in the back of the facility. It improves the floor finishes in the animal areas. Basically, that's really important because of disease control and cleaning. It does increase the dog capacity. It adds 3 puppy kennels, which are currently not there.
So right now, they have to have a separate kennel for the handling of puppies, which I know based on what they've told me in the past is, that can become an issue because if they're in there with the main dog, with the adult dogs, which are loud, and it causes issues when they're trying to deal with handling of puppies when they've had to take them in intake. And also shows an increased cat capacity. The renovation shows 5 court case dog runs. These animals have longer stays and need larger runs in order to stay healthy. The current facility doesn't have any court case dog runs that will meet the size that's necessary based on industry standard. It reconfigures the existing space to better utilize the square footage, as discussed before, and has proper separation of animals based on the health, length of stay, and promoting of adoption. The floor finishes inside the building will be, once again, improved for better disease control and cleaning. We've already had to do several repairs of those floors over the last couple of years based on the material that was on it during the original construction actually peeling up, so we've had to do repairs. It does maintain the current capacity of the renovation portion only, and then a replacement of the existing kennels. And they are basically were installed when the facility was first constructed, so they're kind of ending the end of their design life, and we'll be looking at replacing those as part of that project. So, the updated animal shelter budget. The original budget on the project was about $3.79 million. That was what was originally in the CIP. We came to the board and with the Sheriff's Office and discussed several expansion options. One was about an 8,000 square foot expansion, and another was an 11,000 square foot expansion. At that time, based on the cost estimates that we were provided by Mosley Architecture and their cost estimator, the board elected to add an additional $1 million to the project to go with the 11,000 square foot option. At that time, I think the intent was given for staff to move forward with the 11,000 square foot option, but at that time I don't believe any money was actually allocated to transfer it into that project as part of that decision. The project cost estimate in February 2017, we went back and checked, and actually it's exactly a year apart between these two cost estimates, was $4,770,500. That's 2017 dollars. The 95% construction cost estimate comes in at $6,272,870. That's in 2019 dollars because they project into about midpoint in construction, because if I'm a contractor bidding the job, I'm looking at what the materials cost me at the end of the project, not at the beginning of the project. It's because I account for inflation in the markets. That does represent a budget increase about 32% over projected original. That's the original $3.79 million. We are looking at, upon review of the project, we feel that is because there was a 2-year inflation between 17 and 18. Market conditions have greatly increased in terms of construction costs. And then also there was scope refinement to the renovation, because we went back and forth into what levels of renovation required. And basically at this point we worked to what would maximize the use of that renovated space. Once again, we don't have to do all those renovations. We have to do a portion of those. And in the way we're bidding the project, we do have ability to better negotiate with contractors and even come back and discuss the options once the bidding is completed. One of the questions that were brought up at the last meeting was what our expenditure to date was. And the last time that I was able to pull up in the accounting system, we spent about $356,000 plus or minus on the project. That's design development, getting to the point where we are today to ready to put this thing out to bid. The current project balance is about $3,433,859. Once again, these were just current when I pulled the information out of the financial systems. And then the future expenditures, if you look at the cost of the remaining construction inspection, the remaining design, the facility construction, both renovation and expansion, is about $5,950,000. That puts in this project a potential shortfall of $2,516,141. That includes the $1 million that was previously authorized. Therefore, we're looking at about $1.5 million increased over what the expanded budget was. Something to remember about these cost estimates is the fact that typically those cost estimates are going to fall in either mid to upper 2/3 of a bid range. And we've seen bid packages come in on opening day, range 30% from the low end to the high end. So, we really don't know. We have a good guess what this is going to cost, but we don't know until that bid day comes in and we see what that spread is. So, kind of, they just take this point by point. We can answer questions on the animal shelter now, or we can wait to the end of the discussion process, kind of leave that up to how you guys want to do that.
Why don't we do the animal shelter now? I think there's a lot of a lot of concern, at least for the expenditures that are projected. I'll open up the floor right now. Any questions, concerns at this point? Mr. Ross?
I was concerned when we added the million before, which I did not support, but the board collectively did. So I guess it's a good thing. We've spent $356,000, but what I did a rough calculation, and I guess the numbers just don't make sense. So a total cost is $6,272,870. That's just for the 11,000 square foot expansion.
The $6,272,000, that was the total project estimate. I believe that had some contingency in there of the 11,000 square foot expansion plus the renovation. The renovation, the expansion was around 4.2 or around $4 million, and then the renovation was coming in at about $1.2 million.
Would we be better off, and I'll just cut to the chase, I mean, I wasn't including the renovation, but I was getting about $570 a square foot, which I'm too high there based off what I'd need to take it to about $4 million, it sounds like. But would we be better off just building somewhere else vice renovating at the cost that we're looking at on already owned county land, so we don't have to purchase the land?
I looked at Stafford's project that was being done around the same time as ours. And Stafford's cost estimate, which would have been either 2016 or 2017 dollars for a 15,000 square foot standalone facility, was $6.5 million. So that gives you an idea that, you know, if
and
we
what,
were...
What was the square footage that at? Say that.
That was, the exact square footage was 15,986 square feet, so 16,000 square feet.
And our renovation and the 11,000 puts us at where?
I think the renovation cost was around $140 a square foot, and then the expansion was approximately in the range of, I believe, mid-threes, I believe. I'd have to go back and run that number.
To answer your question, Mr. Ross, the 11,000 square foot plus the existing roughly 8,000 square foot would give us 19,000 square feet total. Stafford's facility, these numbers are for a 16,000 square foot standalone facility.
And did that price for Stafford's include the land?
I do have the breakdown here. No, sir. It's design, grading, site work, building construction, fit and finish items, wet, dry utilities, security, quality assurance, and a contingency.
Anybody else? Mr. Skinner?
Just quick, the reason we went with the 11,000, because we were concerned that in a few years, the way we were growing, we run it. This sort of guaranteed us at least 20 years out, I believe. Is that what
I
we
can't
came?
speak for what the what the sheriff's office say on that. Basically, when we had that discussion, the 8,000 square foot only added potentially about half those additional cages or kennels. So the idea behind going to the 3,000 added those additional features in there, and at that time, I believe the sheriff's office was stating that would meet the 15 to 20 year design life of the facility.
There was an independent space needs done for the animal shelter outside of the space needs study that was done for the county, and I believe that space needs study indicated that the 19,000 square feet would get them the next 20 years, 15 to 20 years.
I think that was one of our concerns when we did that, because 10 years down the road, having to put out a couple more $1 million to do it and stuff of that nature was one of the concerns that they had. So I just want to keep that in mind, that that's a 20-year project as far as us not worrying about animal shelters. Thank you.
Mr. Marshall?
Mr. Chairman, I've got several questions about this, and First off, I want to let everyone know that there's definitely a need for the animal shelter because everybody has a cat or a dog. The county's full of them. We definitely need this facility. I question some of the building costs because we're talking about concrete and chain link, guys. We're not building schools. Stafford County, I think they built a school 2 years ago, around $200 a square foot for that school. I'll just give you a project cost, and we're talking about $300 to build per square foot to build dog kennels. I cannot see I can't grasp the concept of having 4 living rooms inside an animal shelter for dogs and cats to play in. This is an animal shelter where they come in and we do our best to get them to rescues and have them adopted throughout the county. I don't see that that's a need. We definitely need room, and then we definitely need kennels. I would rather see that 20 by 20 space or 10 by 10 space, whatever it is, transferred into more kennels than to have living room furniture that we're paying for dogs and cats to play on. That's just my take on it. Like I say, we definitely need a bigger facility, but having these real life rooms, I don't see the need for it.
Anybody else? Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. Quick question. We had the original cost estimate. We're doing a design. Why would we go public and say, geez, it's going to cost us 20% more? What is the harm in just putting out the bid as is? And if it comes back, then you come back and go, look, none of the bids were within what we were looking at. You know, inflation has hit us, all of this. Because all that we have done is tipped our hand, once again, told everybody that just in case you were thinking of building our shelter for 4.7, we're willing to spend 6.2. And you're going to see those come in like that. I sit here and marvel at why we do things like this. The original budget, again, the other thing too is who gave us these numbers? I mean, honestly, you have 7 elected officials up here who have to make decisions on spending taxpayer dollars. We come up with money that is the taxpayers that we then have to allocate. And now we are down the road to the point that either we spend more money or we don't, and we potentially lose what we have already put into this. And I just find this unacceptable. This gets to the point of just being ridiculous. It's an animal shelter. Like Mr. Marshall said, it is a box with smaller boxes inside for dogs and cats to live in until people come by and pick them up, and they go from there. We need office space. We need bathrooms. We don't need to be building something that is just an outrageous cost. And when we constantly telegraph, guess what? We're 32% over projected. So please bid now. Why would we do that ahead of time? I don't understand that. And I will tell you, I'm really at the point of almost seeing what it would be to cut our losses and to go somewhere else, because this, as I had said before, this space we're stuck with it. We can't expand anymore, as what we've been told before. So if you can't expand anymore, we're dumping all this money into it. We get 20 years out of it, which, again, who does the space needs? Are they held accountable if we only get 12 years out of it? Of course not. It was a guess. It was an estimate. But yet, you're going to have to go down this path again. I would much rather put our money into a facility that we can then expand and expand and expand if necessary, and not back ourselves into a corner like we're doing with this, with a price tag that, when the original one came out, what was it, 13 million was in the newspaper, something like that? And everybody balked at that and said, oh, that's ridiculous. Give it a couple more years, and I think we'll be there. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, I do remember the sheriff's office coming initially, and they initially told us 20, 25 years on the smaller project. But then in a short time frame, they were back again before us asking for the 11,000. And then again, it was guaranteeing us 20 to 25 years. And yeah, I just cannot comprehend this $7 million from 3.7 to somewhere around 7 million, I guess, when we're all said and done.
Our original cost estimate when we did this for roughly 40,000 square feet, if I remember right, it's 36,000 square feet, was over $10 million. Stafford was looking at price quotes at the same time, and they were also looking at 32,000 square feet, and their estimated cost came back at $10 million. So Stafford ended up going with a 16,000 square foot, and we're going with a 19,000 square foot by expanding our existing facility. And in answer to your question, Mr. Yakubowski, the way that our CIP goes back to our transparency, the CIP projects are all set 5 years in advance. The best we can do is use the existing cost estimates that we get to put funding in the CIP in advance of these projects. And as the market changes and as prices change, we have to come back to the board and let you know that the money that was, originally allocated for this project, because of increased cost, is not going to be enough to cover the project, and it's published.
Mr. Chair.
If I might just.
Go ahead, Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. And I understand that. What I'm saying is that we're at the point where we're getting ready to put this out to bid. Just put it out to bid. And if it does come back over, then we can have it explained to us that it was the reasons that we don't have a bid that's within the price range that we were thinking. What I'm saying is you don't do it ahead of time, and I don't understand that. I understand that you have to put in the CIP and all. I just don't know why we just didn't put out the bid with what we had thought. And then if there's a problem, we deal with the problem. We've already, tipped our hand.
Mr. Chair, so along the same lines, so we are at 95%, we're ready to go to bid. So my question is to you now is that if we release the bid and they come back unacceptable, do we have any liability to the vendors?
No, like any bid, if we have those, the bids come back, we don't have to accept any of them.
Right, so we don't have to award.
No,
So I mean,
no, sir.
what I'm looking at, where we are so far, we have the designs essentially, we're ready to issue the bid package. Let's put it out, and I recommend, let's put it out, let's see what comes back, because maybe we'll be surprised. Maybe it'll come back at 4.5, or maybe it's 5, and then we can actually make that decision. Or maybe you can find something in there to cut that maybe it's built at a later date. Maybe we don't have to build all the animal cages initially or something, but I'm going to recommend, why don't we at least move forward with where we are? We've already spent the money, the bid pack's ready to go. We can at least find out where we stand, and maybe we overestimated. Maybe we're on target, and we'll find out when it comes in. Since there's no liability at this point, I think it's worth moving forward.
Mr. Skinner.
I think you're right, Tim. I think we should move forward with this, but if I'm not mistaken, back when we were doing a lot of building and everything, the estimates from our own engineers were almost 25 to 30% higher than we got the bids back from. So I'm hoping that that these will come back. I mean, I don't know where you get them. I know you get them from Northern Virginia and stuff, and it's still very hard for me to understand because we are separate. I mean, every time we go a mile to the north, the same house costs $1,000 more. So why are you telling me that it's going to be the same cost, but yet we're Southern? Maybe it's a different industry out there, but I think we can find people who want to build this and do it right for a fair cost. And I agree with Mr. Yakubowski that we need to put it out there, and here's the requirements, bid on it, period. And I'm come back and see what we want on it. Because that's a history so far we've had in this county. Can you tell me how many bids we put out, what we thought it was, and actually, hasn't been under it?
I don't have
when we built those two, when we built the judicial building and the safety building, we got them for almost 25% less than what our own engineers here thought it was going to cost us to build. So,
I just got a question. Has the county ever acted as a contractor and subcontracted work on big projects like this instead of trying to get a huge corporation or builder to come in and do this stuff? I mean, have we ever looked at that?
We have done GC work on smaller renovation projects. For example, when you go through the Merchant Square building, we've GC'd that work. But when it comes into a building construction, this magnitude, the liability is just not worth taking on, because it's a lot of moving parts, in the contractors to get those to fit together. And it's kind of the old saying, one throat to choke kind of thing. If you're being the GC, you've got 12 different contractors you're trying to negotiate with and try to get prices, and especially the procurement policies, and having to, get quotes for, a very small subset of a tile work in this thing, versus, just going to the GC and saying, hey, with this facility constructed, and then if it's not constructed correctly, we have recourse against that individual, that one entity.
Well, it just seems like we'd be probably hiring a lot more local folks, number one. And number two, you're bringing in those big companies that they're not employing our employers for the most part. They're bringing in their own folks, their own equipment. I don't know. There's got to be some savings. Some $7 million for an animal shelter just blows my mind. And I know Mr. Skinner and Mr. McLaughlin, you're saying go ahead, and so we can pretty much tell the folks that we are approving the $2-something million already in Mr. Taylor's budget. No?
They're just asking to put, they're just asking to put it on bid.
Okay.
And we don't have to, I'm not.
No, all we're saying is
considering approving
essentially-
by getting a bid.
Well, let me ask you this: when would we possibly get those estimates back? And I don't think that we'd get them back in time for the budget. And if we don't, then we're pretty much going to have to make a decision one way or the other as far as this budget goes and this money towards the animal shelter, because we will not get those bids back in time for the budget, right?
That's what Ben and I were just discussing, the timing of getting a bid back. I'm not sure where the building department is in their review process. As soon as we get it released from the building department, we'll be able to put it out to bid. Typically, it's out to bid at least 30, 45 days. And then we have bid opening and we know what the prices are.
So slim chance to none that we're going to get this back in time.
Whether we get that done, though, before you have to approve the CIP
Right.
is going to be.
Well, Mr. Chair, and Lee, on that, the bids are going to come back after we've approved the budget. But this isn't all FY19 money, though, right? This is going to cross fiscal years. So we have allocated money in FY19. If we choose to go forward, we'll have 19 money or 20 money we can put against this project. So it doesn't all have to be funded in FY19, correct? We can reserve the $4 million that's in the budget today for FY19 and fund the rest in 20 if we choose to move forward, if required.
The $3.8 million that we already have on hand for the project, we have that. It's for the project, and as Ben said, we've already spent $356,000 of it. The remaining, what I'm now hearing is $2-point-something million they need is planned in fiscal year 19. And so if you don't adopt that as part of the budget, that means we don't borrow that money or actually we don't have that planned in the CIP and in the budget. You'd have to come back at some point during the course of next fiscal year to approve that. And if we don't have the cash available, then you're going to have to wait till the next summer for us to be able to borrow the funding.
Right, with that, but that would still support the procurement, though, wouldn't it? Even if we had to borrow the following summer, we'd still be able to, because this is an 18-month build starting sometime in the summer of fiscal year 19.
Yeah, we'd have to look at,
Right.
How we.
Right, but you could structure the build schedule, yeah.
Yeah, we can work the contract to try to do that.
So what I'm saying is I don't think there's a lot of risk by us moving forward, because we can balance this budget over 2 fiscal years. And if the numbers come in good, we're good. If not, then we can decide whether or not to borrow the additional money in FY20 to support the final production or construction.
Mr. Skinner?
Just last question. How much of this did we add? Because when this all started, the animal shelter had requirements by the state to fix, or we would be in contempt of the state, I guess, is what they told me. So have we fixed those problems, or is this something that's part of it, part of this fix, or part of this new building is part of the fix? And are we clear of that? Because we do have some legal responsibility here, I think.
Yeah, we have fixed the flooring issue that was one of the main concerns that they had, and fixed some of the kennel issues that they concerned about cleaning. The remaining item is within the circle, once again, number 2, which is the cat intake, and number 3, which is the canine intake. That has not been addressed yet. They basically said, as long as you're moving forward on the renovation and expansion, it's not an issue. But should that project come to a stall out, or they don't see appropriate progress on it from the VDH, not VDH, but the VDAC's point of view, they would want to see us move in there and do that renovation at least to number 2 and number 3 within that circle. And that would bring us up to the last time that I'm aware, the last inspection that would meet all the requirements that were set forth.
Could you speak with the, is that still right now what you're talking about? Would the sheriff agree with what you just said, that we're not in any difficulty of being fined or of stuff of this nature? Because this has been going on for quite a long time.
Based on the latest information I have, but I would really want to confirm with him.
I would like that.
It's his specialty. So.
Okay. Thanks.
I think we can move on.
All right, we wanted to look at the Department of Social Services and the discussion of a DSS building as part of the CIP. At the last meeting, there was discussion over the 2013 space needs study, and looking back at that study and determining how accurate that is based on the current need. Staff from our departments reached out to Gail with Social Services, and we're currently looking at a review of that space needs and plan to come back on March 13th at the board meeting to present a more in-depth view of where that facility is actually currently at. Space needs review, we're looking at office spaces because they are out of office space. We're looking at case loading. It's something that Gail made an important point of, is that some of the space needs was based on population projections, not case loading. And really it needs to be on case loading because she's basically 150% on some of those case loads based on the number of staff that she has. And also mandated programs or changes that are coming down from the state and federal governments, potentially increasing staff sizes as necessary. She can speak more to those specific concerns on the 13th. Some of the initial priority considerations that they had when we reached out to them the other day was they want close proximity to the health department, courts, and public safety, just because they work so much with court cases and be able to get there and back to bring files, my understanding, files into the courts, the files of the judges, the attorney's offices. Once again, we can go more in detail on the 13th. And then operation needs. We took a real quick review of our current space. The visitation spaces, that's where folks come in and visit the, potentially the adolescents or toddlers or basically the children that have been placed in foster care or other events. It's kind of basically inadequate within the existing building. It needs to be a bigger space. You need to have 2 different viewing spaces because you can't have 2 going at one time because of confidentiality issues. Security improvements, as we kind of saw that was an issue a couple of weeks ago. Confidentiality is a big issue, and what I mean by that is the facility doesn't actually lend itself to the confidentiality or the confidential conversations that take place because there's not a lot of small meeting rooms, or there's not a lot of rooms within department head offices or supervisor offices to have discussions regarding cases. And then another big thing, which actually was surprising to me walking through the facility, was the drug screening. They desperately need a drug screening room, bathroom, because currently if they have to do a drug screening, they actually have to close the staff toilet in the facility for as long as it takes while that drug screening is going on. It's one of those issues. It's not like a doctor's office where it's passed through. You physically have to observe this drug screen being taken in the restroom facility, so it has to be closed down. So that is an issue on the floor. And then we looked at, Mr. Skinner, I believe you asked some questions about the location within the courthouse area. We identified 2 potential locations that could be discussed. As one is the outline in red is the land adjacent to the Circuit Court and Public Safety Building. And the most logical place that you would want to look at putting the facility would be somewhere potentially, really the only place, is within the parking lot that is there, or a portion within the parking lot. We would have to really take a hard look at an overall study of the parking demands. And when I say parking demands, you need to factor in the current loading of the Circuit Court, the fact that the next project we'll be talking about is Judicial Center, that expansion of the Judicial Center, when that shell space fills up with additional courtrooms or office space or clerk space. And then public safety, should the additional, I believe there's a small addition that could be added to the side of that building that would increase it about a third. How do those all interlink and work together with a social services building, and how that would work with overall parking? Just want to make sure that as we move forward, we don't want to either you have to acquire more land for parking, or you end up in a situation, worst case scenario, you're looking at, vertical parking, which is not a cheap option. The other location we looked at is there's actually 3 county-owned lots adjacent to the Hobart building. They is separated by 1 privately held lot. We would have to really look at doing a conceptual plan that would factor in parking, building size, stormwater, to really determine that parcel size and to determine if additional land is required and how we can go about acquiring that land or getting a spot big enough if we were to construct a facility adjacent to the Hobart building.
In addition to siting a building, we're also looking at the feasibility of locating or using a lease in existing commercial space. So we'll be back on the 13th to give some more information to the board.
Do we own any, I didn't catch that or not, the 2 pieces you showed us next to the Hobart building, which is going to be that way?
Yes, sir.
Is that our property?
Yes, sir, that direction.
Yes, that is on the screen now. The 2
Those are both our
red polygons are ours, and the property between them is owned by others.
Dr. Tramby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to hear that you're going to present us with another option in a couple of weeks. It seems that we're trying to decide to build a new building as part of the budget process. And it's really a separate decision. My question might be for the finance team. When we pass the CIP next month or the 1st of April, whenever it is, how specific does it have to be? Can we set aside funds for space needs for social services with the decision of how exactly to provide that to be made later?
You can. I mean, we can still have it just as it is in the budget, that it's for social services, the health department, whatever it is that you want to make it for. And then that funding would just sit there until a later date when you want to make a decision about that. We wouldn't have to necessarily spend it just because it's in the plan.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. McClellan?
Don't go too far. So a question here. So some folks have been coming to us as well, and I think Mr. Benton brought something up last week or so about, I guess this goes back to how is social services funded? So a lot of it comes from the state, I understand, correct?
Yes, there's state funding, there's local funding, there's federal pass-through funding.
Does their
And there
lease
are
space pay for that?
Well, there are, and part of what I've asked Gail to bring back at your next meeting is a side-by-side comparison. There are actually multiple either programs or solutions. Mr. Skinner had mentioned at a prior meeting the state reimbursement of rent. There's also state reimbursement for depreciation cost in the event that you own a building. Of course, depreciation declines over time. Rent stays par or tends to go up over time. There are structures. First of all, there are different qualifications or programs or percentages, and I don't have those at fingertips, but Gail is going to bring back to us how those work and what the comparison would be toward what might get us the best reimbursement from the state, and then we can structure appropriately. Even on property we own, we can ground lease that for a build-to-suit lease back to us.
Right.
If rent is the most economically productive reimbursement.
Well, and that's my concern. I think we've been just barreling down the path to build a new building. And I don't know that I haven't heard a lot of people running down here saying, let's build another building. But if there are other solutions out there that potentially, maybe even the cost may be slightly higher in rent, but we're not outlaying $9 million in a capital expense that we own forever, and we don't know what's going to happen in Health and Human Services in the future. Maybe it goes down, but we're stuck with a big building. If you're leased, at least you can change. There's options out there. So I would definitely like to see our options before we make a decision on this. So that's why I wanted to bring that up.
Mr. Taylor? Oh, I thought you had a question. Anybody else? All right.
All right, we'll move on to the Judicial Center expansion. Last time we briefed the board, we were at the initial design development discussion with the stakeholders regarding this expansion. This is a proposed 3-story expansion adjacent to the existing General District Courts building. Basically, it's in the little courtyard area back there where there's some parking and the HVAC units are to support the existing courthouse buildings. The Building C, which is the old Circuit Court Clerk's office, would receive a light renovation, and then General District Court clerks would move into that space. There is some security improvements in Building B and in Building C and in the new building as well. Basically, the facility will be constructed with a secured first floor parking, a second floor, which would be the General District Courts building, courtroom with shell space, and then there is a bid option to add on a juvenile and domestic relations courtroom on the 3rd floor with shell space. Currently, we're at 30% plans, and if things progress along the design schedule, we are looking at bidding it out this summer as well, with the construction in fall, winter of 2018. I'll give you an update on the Judicial Center budget. The building expansion, we got an initial cost estimate based on, once again, 30% plans here, not full 95% plans like the animal shelter. The site work, secure parking, the General District Courtroom is around $10.9 million. That's base. Once again, we're doing a 30% plans here. And then the bid alternate 1, which was the additional juvenile and domestic relations courtroom, we were given an estimate of around $900,000 base for that facility. And that's all inclusive. That includes architectural engineering services and construction. Once again, that as we progress farther down this project, we'll have better cost estimates where those fall based on the market conditions and on what actually is going to be built. We've actually performed an additional review of the project, and after talking with finance, they recommend this be consolidated into the single project as opposed to a independent project. VAVs, they're variable air volume units. Basically, that's your HVAC units to control the temperature in the courtrooms or in the major open spaces. The facilities, both A and B, which is where the Commonwealth Attorney's Office is, current General District Court clerk space, the current General District Courtroom, and old Circuit Court clerk spaces, those units are 20 to 25 years old, which means they are at the end of their life expectancy. So, you know, knock on wood, they haven't failed, but they could fail tomorrow, and I can't blame the equipment for holding out for that long. The problem is that some of these units are the size of a small Volkswagen. They are large units, especially considering the age of when this building was built. So you actually have to remove entire ceiling grids and walls to get to these things. It's not pretty, it's not easy. And if you do it while folks are still occupying the space, then you are pushing them out of that space for a good duration while you complete that work. So that's the reason we looked at this as a staggered project and are recommending that we replace these items prior to space usage. This would put Building C needing VAV replacements before General District Court clerks move into that space. So basically, after we'd finished the shell building and the General District Court space, before General District Clerk moved into Building C, we need to look at doing VAV replacements within that building. And then we'd go back over, vice versa, to Building A and B before the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office took over additional space in Building A and B. We would need to look at doing VAV replacements. And then when in the space that he's vacated, you know, kind of uses the jockey space to get that mission completed, to get those VAVs replaced. Once again, it's you know, they're in the service life. You know, it's not easy to get to them and to actually replace them. And the best time to do it is now in conjunction with the expansion and renovation, because we have that space to jockey folks around so that we're not closing down a critical facility for any major length of time. Any questions on the Judicial Center, where we're at currently right now?
Do we have the money, or are we borrowing all this money?
I'll have to let Bonnie ask about how I'm not sure exactly how the funding is going on the Judicial Center replacement.
Originally, we had $9.6 million for the Judicial Center. We already have that money on hand. Some of it is being spent for the design work, and the majority of that funding was borrowed using the 2005 bond referendum. There is no more authority to borrow bonds for that, to borrow money for that building at this time. And so the additional $6.3 million that's planned in fiscal years 20 and 21 of the CIP is primarily cash. There is nothing planned more to borrow for that.
That includes the VAV replacement, correct, Bonnie?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
So the old sheriff's office demolition, that project is progressing. We're at 95% design of the demolition plan and just stabilization of the existing courthouse. It took us a little bit longer to work through some of the umbilical HVAC electrical issues associated with the historic courthouse. We are preparing those plans for review in the code compliance, and after that review, we'll be ready for bidding. We're hoping bidding be by the end of March, potentially April. So we'd be having to work with some demolition timeframes based on county events to make sure that we're not interrupting anything. So that project is progressing, and we'll hopefully have some numbers on that relatively soon. Merchant Square building. This is the space that was designated for the museum annex. That is basically the storage facility for the museum space in terms of some of the artifacts that they have. The expected completion of that space is April 2018. Will include about, say, 5,000 to 6,000 square feet of just open space. We're just painting the ceiling black. We're not putting the drop ceiling in there. The flooring will receive a coating, and then just generalized paint in the facility. And there's two offices and 2 back workrooms that are constructed on the back of that space. The important thing about this project is he currently, or the museum annex is currently located in Building C, where the General District Court Clerk will be moving as part of the renovation process of the Judicial Center. So we have to have those items and artifacts moved out in order to begin that work. So, the idea behind this is to hopefully have him in there by April or May of 2018, and that's a good time frame to begin the work on the Judicial Center.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Are we on budget on that?
I believe we are actually under budget on that. I believe we had 600,000 or so designated, I believe. I think that the project will be in the range of around 4 to 450, I'm guessing, by the time it's all said and done.
All right, thank you.
Please be reminded, I believe we moved some of the money from the sheriff's office for the demolition. Originally, that project was to redo that building, so we moved some of that funding over to Merchant Square so that we could get that first floor finished.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ross?
So I just had a question. I think I already know the answer, but when you say it allows the Judicial Center project to progress, is that to store things?
Yes, sir. That his, I'm sorry, Terry Doherty's the museum curator, and that his annex space is in Building C, where the General District Clerk will move to. So we have to get all of the artifacts and storage items he has in there over to the Merchant Square building prior to moving on space.
And how much did this build out cost? And how many square foot is it?
It is approximately a little over 7,000 square feet, and the build out, I think the last time I looked, we were GCing this project, I think we're looking at the 400,000 range is where we're at total.
400,000?
Yeah.
I would just ask staff to look at contracting out storage. I know it's got to be climate control, but there are storage places. If that's all we're going to use it for, Vice using it as storage space. I'm not sure, especially if somebody else could move in temporarily, and I'm not, for instance, social services, if that could help in the interim before we figure out what we're going to do.
Storage is certainly a significant component, Mr. Ross, but it's also Mr. Doherty's workspace for the display planning and the display panels and other assembly that he does. So it's a combination, and we'll have to look at how much of it is storage and whether or not that might be severed off and relocated.
Also, Mr. Ross, the renovation that was done there is really just bare basic. If you look at the photograph there, the ceiling grids are painted black. If that were to be used for office space, we would have to do some additional renovation in
So,
there.
so was the intent the whole time to use it as storage and just marginally renovate it? Or, I
It
mean,
was-
why are we not building it out, vice making it marginal?
But the intent was to move the museum annex over there, at least while the construction was taking place over at the Judicial Center.
And then after that, what's the plan?
I believe the plan was to leave the annex there in place.
I mean, is there a plan to fully renovate this space out, or?
It wasn't originally.
No. And is it now?
That's what I'm pointing out, that if that space use changes, then there'll need to be some additional type renovation in there, drop ceilings, additional drops.
Yeah, I would guess, based on the square footage, and so let's say to install a drop ceiling, drop the sprinkler heads, do carpet tile as opposed to just a sealed concrete floor, some electrical drops, 75 to 100,000 probably.
Is there any cost savings to doing that all at once, advice doing it piecemeal to use it?
Not necessarily, because we're GCing this, and
Okay.
we would have an independent contractor doing those drop ceilings and doing the flooring, so.
So, Mr. Chair, real quick.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Have we not looked at maybe moving the museum and making this social services facility? This is a Class A office building. We should be using it as such. And we could put the museum, it might be cheaper to build a new museum than using this space here that we obviously seem to have a problem with space, but we have a building that's up and it's partially finished. And isn't social services on the second floor?
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't that double their space?
We'd add about 7,000 square feet to their space, so yeah.
They have 7,000 now?
Yeah, they have on the second floor around 17,000. The additional this space on the first floor would be additional 7,000. They have about 3,000 already existing on the first floor, so that bring.
This would give them 21,000 square feet?
So that should probably bring it to around 25 to 27,000.
How much do they need?
I think that's something we're evaluating.
Because, I mean, that's a
based on
fairly large space, and if all it takes is $75,000 or maybe $100,000 to renovate this space and move social services in and find another location for the annex, I think that would be maybe a wise move or something that we really need to take a look at, because that is a building that should be used as an office space.
We'll bring that information back as well.
Anybody else? All right.
Courthouse sidewalk extension, we are making progress on that, and that will be out for bidding and construction the summer of 2018. Once again, this project did the short sidewalk extension back toward Company 1 from the Hobart Building, and then also back toward Robert E. Lee School along Brock Road. Marshall Center office moves. You may notice if you go visit Procurement, Finance, or IS, in order to provide a little better usage of space, we've moved those three departments around. We've actually moved facilities management out of the second floor of the Marshall Center over to the old Capitol Construction Building. Hopefully you'll see a sign not too long that'll go up that says Public Works out there. So that's where our facilities management and Public Works operation will be maintained out of. And then that provided additional office space for, like I said, procurement, finance, and IS. And that project is finishing up.
Excuse me one second,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. I just wanted, you got ahead of me on the sidewalk a little bit, and it's a little
sorry,
personal
sorry.
pet peeve of mine, but do we still have all the grant money that was originally there for the sidewalk? Wasn't there 1.1 million in grant money, or?
We do, Bonnie.
Because this is like a gold-plated
The
super
project-
sidewalk,
The
right?
project that'll never end.
Yeah, but this is,
Still do have the grant money for it.
it's
Yes.
a 1.1 or how much?
I don't have that information.
And that's, 300,000 or so from the county?
It was an 80-20 match, but I don't recall what the grant funding
Okay,
was.
but we still have the money, because
We do.
that's
Yes.
5-6 years old, right? So I wasn't make sure it didn't expire or something.
It did not.
Project is significantly older than 5 to 6 years. Yes, this
Okay.
has been going on.
But
for
we have
quite
the
some
money,
time.
okay.
We
All
do.
We have done several extensions with VDOT and Federal Highways.
I think that's it.
Okay. Any questions on just, if you go looking for folks, you might want to make sure that the office signs are up so you know where they're at if you go visit the second floor of the Marshall Center.
I'm sorry, are we going to be putting anything out to the citizens in one of the alerts or anything like that as far as moves or the shuffling of the voters registration, all that good stuff?
And we'll have that out on social media, out on our webpage, and have releases to announce changes in location, certainly.
Thank you.
So we wanted to give actually a little more concentration to Marshall Center bathrooms. We met with stakeholders actually on site today and walked through those restroom facilities. And what you see down here on the left is actually a photo of the women's restroom, the second floor Marshall Center. There is a men's room and there's a women's room up there for county staff and for the public to use. There are concerns over the existing plumbing, and if anybody's gone into one of those restrooms and actually opened a tap, you'll see that the water comes out yellow. That's not from our distribution system. That's because of the iron in the water. Because of the corrosion of the pipes. So we have an issue with the existing plumbing really impacting the water quality and water flow, because actually the pipes are scaling up to the point to where pressures and flows are actually being impeded to the fixtures, which means they don't work necessarily as well as they should. And then if they actually, like actually today, kind of funny enough, one of our staff members was in the restroom and opened a faucet and then couldn't get the shut back off. And what happened is, that iron particulate breaks free and gets up in that faucet and won't let it shut. So, it's kind of it was a good timing in terms of for our folks to see that. The existing stalls, particularly in the women's room, do not meet code. Basically, what you see down here on the left-hand side is the 4 stalls in the women's room. Those actually, they built the building to last. It's lasted a long time, but there has issues now of these were actually granite partitions that are actually built into the concrete floor and the tile work in the building itself. So, we looked at the potential of just ripping down those granite partitions and putting up metal ones, but then that causes issues with not only the plumbing of the toilets, but also relaying of the tile in the facility to try to make it work. And you'll notice that, we kind of went through some talk about some functionality issues. The stall heights and widths are issues. You can imagine that bathroom, the fixtures have been updated, but generally was designed for a teenager or a high schooler to use in 1950 or 1960. So the stalls themselves are actually, I can look over the top of them and see in. So not that I'm hanging out in the women's restroom, but, if I go in there, somebody goes in there, they can see over the top of that stall. And without doing some major work, it's difficult to try to really take any corrective action. As you can see, the 4 lavatories, the 4 sinks there, there's no counter space to set anything down with if you have papers or your purse or anything you might have, and the same thing goes to the men's room. This is actually an older building, and it's all cinder block walls, and if you ever went in this big vacant, not vacant space, but a big space and talk loudly, you notice you do have echoes and things like that. There are issues with sound attenuation in some of the restrooms on the facility, especially when you're dealing with office spaces being directly next door. That's been documented. Limited hot water, and by that I mean the facilities are so far away from where the boiling hot water heaters are, and the flow is so restricted that we have it takes a long time for the hot water to get there if you want hot water. And we looked at potentially putting what's called instant hots in those facilities, but that requires us to look at doing additional electrical wiring, and also the particulate or basically the iron in the water clogs those things up really quickly, so it becomes a maintenance issue. And then once again, it was designed for student use back in the day, and now we're trying to look at it using it for more professional office setting. One of the big key items here is that any renovation that we do, short of just basically in-kind replacement, triggers mandatory federal rules on ADA compliance, which basically means that if we go in there and rip down all the stalls, we have to make an effort to make that ADA compliant. And I believe even spend a 20% premium on top of that to bring the building up to overall ADA compliance. So it's kind of a not necessarily a gray area, but it's a trip point you have to watch in terms of, if I go in there and replace a sink, I'm probably okay, but if I go in there and start changing plumbing or changing how the building is, or the restrooms are actually laid out, I technically trip that federal ADA compliance mandate, which we would have to work with. So we took after this conversations this morning with staff and the stakeholder, we really looked at some options, try to figure out what we can do on 2 different scopes. And we really looked at this as an aesthetic improvement option and a renovation option. The aesthetic improvement we could look at painting the walls, restore paint partitions. We really can't, once again, those are granite partitions cast on the floor. We can't necessarily just rip them out without causing some major issues. Now, you could replace the fixtures as is, but the problem I have, if I just pull up on the sinks and replace it with an in-kind fixture, it's going to stain within, I don't know how many, it could be within a year, 6 months. And you haven't changed the root cause problem of the staining, which is the iron buildup in the water from the boiler systems and the plumbing. So you end up having new fixtures that become stained and look old. And also, we could look at just adding some freestanding counters in those bathrooms to meet that need. Just a rough back of the envelope guess, we were looking at $5,000 each for those bathrooms, just for the aesthetic improvements. And when we talk about painting, that's structural tile on the walls. So in the way it's glazed, trying to paint it, we've talked to folks and even had our own experience. Painting it doesn't necessarily always work out very well. So that the color of the walls where the tile is, which is about 5 to 6 feet high, is not going to change. When I talk about painting, we're talking about the painting the top 3 foot of the wall to get rid of the peeling paint that's in there that we see today. The other option, which we priced out, and this is another project that we would, if this was desired, we would actually do in the GC work on it ourselves as opposed to just turnkeying this, is working on renovating the plumbing basically from the basement area up to those facilities so that you have better water and sewer service to those 2 bathrooms. We work on ADA compliance. We would look on services. We would look on redoing the tile, redoing partitions, trying to save what we can and use what we can in the facility, but also try to get at a more modernized and functional space. And we'd also, with that, look at replacing the fixtures. And this, we kind of base this off of a cost estimate we already received and looking at what we really feel doing the GC work would be. That price is going to be around $50,000 a restroom to really do what needs to be done to make it a really functional space and to not have it be potentially subject to failures if we go in there and do some restore and paint work, and the very next day there's no guarantee that an elbow in the cast iron drainage system doesn't clog up and I'm ripping a 3x3 hole in the wall just to go in and try to fix that. And then once again we're back to a patch scenario in the wall and trying to make that look good. So we just kind of wanted to give a brief discussion of that bathroom facility and kind of gauge what, if there's any thoughts from the board on where we should take that.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. I think what this does is open up a bigger conversation about what we're going to do with the Marshall Center and the building and the structure, because this is the beginning of what we do. And I don't remember us having a conversation where we say this is the path that we're going down. We haven't done that. And I think we need to do that because, if you're going to do it, you do it right. But if you're going to do it right, that means it's part of a bigger fix. And if it's not, what are we going to be doing with it? Because it was originally part of the bond referendum in 2014, but it was pulled out by the board. And so now I think we're paying cash. This is not bonded money to redo.
This would be a cash-funded project.
Okay, so it's going to take substantially more cash to bring it up to par. So I would really, at some point, and I think actually, Mr. Ross, you had put out an email a while back about that. I think that is a conversation we need to have because once we embark on that, we need to do it the right way, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and we need to understand what that's going to be. And so I don't really want to make those type of decisions now. I would much rather have that discussion first. But if a Band-Aid fix of just painting it and making it look nice for now is good enough, that's fine, because I know that they do need help. But I would much rather us as a board have a discussion and figure out what we're going to do. Thanks.
Mr. Marshall?
Mr. Chairman, a couple questions. As far as being ADA compliant, the first floor of the Marshall Center, we're using it as the senior and teen center. Also, the Snow Library is being used there. Are those restrooms and plumbing, has that been replaced and ADA compliant?
Yes, sir. It was probably over 10 years ago. I believe those 2 restrooms were actually renovated and made ADA compliant. When they did those facilities, that project cost well over $100,000. That was back in the capital construction days of the county. And the issues they had there was they didn't do any of the MEP or the replacement of the plumbing leading to the actual bathroom itself. So they did some of the replacement in the crawl space of the Marshall Center, converting that over to copper plumbing, but a lot of that behind the walls in those 2 first-floor bathrooms are still the old galvanized and old cast.
Right, so we put a Band-Aid on it 10 years ago.
That's correct.
Basically. So, and the upstairs bathroom would be the only bathroom that's not ADA compliant in the building?
I believe so. I think the only thing it wouldn't factor in, and Kevin might be able the locker rooms, but they're not public spaces. I think we're really looking at.
Yeah, we're not using them as restrooms for
Right,
employees and public.
Right. I think the biggest thing is there's 2 bathrooms on the 2nd floor. The only one is not ADA that's really heavily used by staff and the public.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to see the bathrooms fixed. I hate to spend $50,000 a piece on them, but given the county officers that are there and the people that are having to use them, that's a rough looking bathroom. And when I first brought this up, I Google. You go to Google, search prison bathrooms. People that have lost their rights have a better bathroom facility than employees here in Spotsylvania County are using, and I think that's wrong. So I'd like to see them fixed. That's my take on it. Let's say that's the only restroom facility we have in the building that's not ADA compliant. I'd like to see them fixed.
Mr. Ross?
I think you need to come back to the board with, the email that Mr. Jakubowski was referring to, Ben, was your response back to me that I sent out to all board members, and that was on I'm trying to see if it was the 13th of February at 10:51. You've kind of listed out everything that is going to be needed, and it looks like a $5 to $10 million cost for the boiler system and to renovate and get nothing else. I think we should have had this during the discussion we had when St. Mike's was actually interested. They're not interested in the Marshall Center anymore, and it's a lot of money to pour down the drain, if per se. So, and I hope that's not what we're going to do, but I think it's something that the board does need to discuss. I would like to see the bathrooms functional as well, but I think we need to have a big picture what this board as a majority wants to do with the building, especially because it sounds like you could go in there and all of a sudden we might need a boiler replacement, or that could happen at any time. Once you start tearing up one thing, it could lead to other things breaking, and the whole water system might need to be replaced just by this renovation. I mean, I doubt it happens, but it's possible.
I own a house built in 1911, and it seems like every time I open a wall to do renovation, it causes me to do renovation about 2 rooms over from where I'm at.
Gotcha.
So it's always something you're kind of chasing.
Sure.
Anybody else? All right. Do we want a date for when to have some of this information back to us? Do we want this before the budget's done, or we're going to be approving CIP stuff here pretty soon? I think there's plenty of CIP for the Marshall Center, so.
Mr. Chairman, one thing, didn't we just replace the windows in the Marshall Center not too long ago?
Yes, sir. I think it was a couple of years ago, but yeah, it's been within the last 5 years.
So we're looking at renovating some plumbing. I'm sure, I'd like to say, come back to us with the numbers, but we've been making improvements to this building over the years.
Let me ask you all, since staff, Mr. Linden, when do you think you could have some numbers and figures back to us to include I know we've talked about moving personnel over there to making it efficient and effective for employee work. Is there any?
I mean, we could do some pretty quick back of the envelope kind of scenarios. The key is that I don't believe an actual true engineering assessment of the building and looking at what can be done is really taking place, and those are not cheap studies. So I mean, that would obviously take additional time. But if you wanted a back of the envelope, I believe we could probably have some really rough concepts together by the 13th, couldn't we? First meeting in March. So we have a lot of information together, so we could pull together some additional information on it. Once again, those are back of the envelope staff estimates. We're not engaging architects and engineers to
Right.
go out there and dig through the building, but give you an idea of what we're looking at.
Because I know there's some structural things you got to watch out with that building. So it's just about every cinder block wall is load bearing. So, yeah, if y'all could come back on the, Mr. Taylor, back on the first meeting in March. What, Mr. Yakubaski?
With options, you know, what is the full-blown fix? What would that be? What is sort of the mid-fix? And so that we can pick, because it might work out that we go ahead and renovate the bathrooms. I just want to know that we're not renovating something that is going to take $50 million. And I know I'm being, ridiculous, but it's going to take $50 million to repair. We might want to look at doing something sort of in the mid-range as opposed to the full.
So, Mr. Chair, so along those same lines, I think we have to take a real look at the building. It's an old building, and, I used to own an old building, and it's a money pit. The question comes in, how much usable space are we getting out of that building? And at what point is it better to replace the building with another office type facility? We can still call it the Marshall Center. But I mean, what time does it, yeah, I know. But at what point do you make the decision that maybe we're not, it's not a great office building because it's a school. The question is are we better off investing in a new facility than continue to throw money down, or not, to renovate this? Because I think that's kind of what these options you're really looking at. One is minimal, one's medium, which you're kind of keeping the building, and maybe the large one is we're replacing with another type structure that houses more of the county office spaces and staff and stuff like that. So, and maybe that's a longer study, but I think we have to look at that, because you're talking about putting a lot of money over the years to keep this building up to, and particularly put it into compliance with different codes. And if the HVAC system's going on that large building, that's another issue.
You still think you can get us back something?
Yeah, I think we'll have a better idea. We can go through some of those options. We may not have costs on those options necessarily. Once again, back at the envelope cost, maybe what we're dealing with, not full engineering costs. Yeah. So, order of magnitude kind of level stuff.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, one other thing, and just the space that's there, usable space, and also if there's any way that if we decided to keep something like that, could we, add on to it? Can we? How far in the future can we use this, or is it sort of built out to its usable space?
Just give you a quick update on the sidewalk rehabilitation that's kind of currently put on hold pending the demolition of the sheriff's office, and we'll begin a phased approach on that the summer of 2018. Once again, that was a maintenance project to fix uneven bricks, loose mortar, safety issues in the courthouse area. Voter registration move. This actually will be taking place. It's on schedule for March 6, 2018. The voter registration office will move from the building right behind the Hobart building over to the new location at the South Point building located near the Cracker Barrel and South Point Parkway. New address is 4708 South Point Parkway in Fredericksburg, Virginia, 22407. And the phone number will not change. It'll actually have the same phone number at that facility. And once again, that is scheduled for March 6, 2018. Give you an idea, this is the overall map. I believe Mrs. Akers is working on some distribution materials to let folks know that this change is taking place. But you can see the Route 1 corridor, 95, and then the STAR is the actual location, the South Point building, where the voter registration will be. Once again, across from the Cracker Barrel area there at the Route 1 interchange.
Are they taking up the entire building?
They are occupying the space that was formerly the Lidl space to the left, and then they're actually using the insurance space for storage, secure storage for the voter registration, or voter machines. And then the center will remain the tourism office, visitor center.
What's planned for their old building?
I believe there was discussion of moving the conservation district or the extension office over to that space.
I just say on that move, could we hold off on having them move right now?
Yeah, discussion was exactly the right word.
Right.
And we need to evaluate what needs to be done to to the space following the move out of the registrar and work further from there.
Yeah, we're a ways away from that point. It's just right now we're trying to get her moved, prior to some of the deadlines that the state has for her, so.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, the Marshall Park Convenience Center, just a quick update on that. Once again, that was a compactor conversion for collection efficiency and site safety. Hopefully this will be the last presentation I give on this one. The compactor will be installed in operation in March 2018, so that facility should be back up and fully operational here in the next month or so. With that, any last questions on my stuff before I let Kevin start up on his side of the shop?
We had a couple of Parks and Recs projects that I was looking to get some guidance from the board. One of those projects is the Marshall Park renovation. This project is fully funded, and Kevin can walk through the project as it was originally designed. There was for those of you that are familiar with it, there's an existing.
Ed, you're looking at the screen like there's something on it. There we go.
Oh, I apologize.
Thanks so much. Brilliant.
Sorry. You want to describe what you have there, or do you want me to go ahead?
No. Basically, this is the existing park. You'll see the parking lot, the 2 baseball fields, and you'll see that this picture was taken in the fall, this aerial photo, because what we do in the fall is use the second baseball field for soccer in the fall season. You also can see the existing soccer field. Sure, okay. The existing soccer field, our current playground location, and then also in this layout, we've shown where the proposed rectangular field is going to be, and then a proposed playground site. So this is the changes that we're looking at making in scenario 1. Basically, what our problem is, we don't have enough parking. To accommodate that, we're looking at adding parking where the current rectangular field is, and that would involve adding 76 parking spaces. And then you can see where the new rectangular field would go behind the baseball field 2. There's a walking path around field 2, and then the playground would be relocated. Currently, it's near the basketball courts, and it would be relocated back behind field 2, just to give you an idea about that. So, and we're required to put a sidewalk in front of the park. So,
but it also to note, the rectangular field is not a full-size soccer field. The existing soccer field that's up there is not a full-size soccer field, and the new proposed field, basically, you're going to move the field from the top to the bottom part of the park and replace the top rectangular field with parking as its existing design.
So, just to clarify, the new field that you would build is not going to be regulation either, correct?
it is much closer to regulation.
Closer, but still not there.
That's correct.
Not quite there, yes, sir. Yeah, we have 2 size fields. We have a small-sided field and a large-sided, and this is in between the small and the large, so it would be used mostly for the small-sided.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
The restrooms are right there.
Thank you. Real quick, you said there's a sidewalk in the front.
Yes.
And you're required to do that according to whom?
That is what planning, the engineers have told us that planning is.
So we're telling ourselves we need to build a sidewalk?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there's no other sidewalk there, right?
No, sir.
Is there any other sidewalk planned to be there?
Not that I'm aware of. The lot beside it is a vacant lot.
To the up here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's not part of anything. It's not starting off a sidewalk, can't we just maybe bank that money in the sidewalk fund and then do it when we need to, as opposed to building it now? And it just doesn't, we'll talk to planning if need be.
Sure.
Okay.
We can look at that.
All right. Thank you.
This is scenario 2 that we have discussed. This would be basically eliminating the soccer field completely, bringing in where the existing soccer field was, putting in about 16 parking spaces. And then we would move the playground that's located in this area into this grass area. So we'd still have the grass area for practices and people to just spend time in that area. Makes the playground in a much safer location. Right now, it's not in the best locations beside the basketball court. And this also would give us an area where the playground is, it has to be fenced in just for safety reasons. So that would give us a little bit of an overflow parking area if we needed it. So to give you an idea of cost, the first proposal would be in the $517,000 range, and this is about $120,000. That's what we're looking at. So
The reason that I'm bringing this to the board is because when I looked at this project, with the way that it was originally designed, we had about a dozen residences that reside along the road that runs parallel to the park. And the residents that were there signed a petition that they didn't want particularly the field moved to where we were proposing to move it to. That was one issue that I had when I looked at it. The other issue was that it's not a full-size field. So by putting in some additional parking at the top, we still have an area where they can be used as green space and practice field. And when Kevin gets to the second option, I'm not proposing that we do away with the soccer field, but there was a CIP project in the future, or in the past, I'm sorry, that was eliminated moving forward to the future that would put a park behind Spotsylvania Middle School. And there's already a large area there that's already graded. So with the delta in the cost of $517,000 for option 1 and $120,000 for option 2, I asked Kevin to look at what it would cost to put a full-size soccer field in behind the middle school. So that's that's the main reason that I'm coming here tonight, to get some guidance from the board as to where you think we should spend our money putting that soccer field.
the cost estimate we've received on that is about $380,000 for the soccer field at Spotsylvania Middle School. The reasoning behind that is irrigation, and it would be a Bermuda field versus normal fescue.
Kevin, can you show them with the pointer where you're talking about?
This area right
locating
here
that?
is a wide open area that multiple teams practice on right now, but there's some grading issues. This at one time was a pond, so the soil is not the best of soil. It holds water really bad, so there's going to be quite a bit of grading, even though it's somewhat flat. To make it a field that's going to hold up well, it's going to involve some grading.
Mr. Chair, question.
Yeah.
So if you go to a higher end field, you know, all these teams, the football teams that practice on it, are they going to tear it up or?
Excuse me, what was your first part of your question?
Well, I mean, so.
If you just use one team?
Well, this is, you know, it's a multi-purpose field.
Yes.
So it's for soccer, field hockey, football. If the football, they tend to tear them up more than the other teams, don't they? Are they going to tear, if we spend $400,000 on a field, are they going to tear it up?
Our concerns are with it being used by the school and Parks and Rec, that it's going to get more use than a typical park field. That's one of the concerns about it. You know, you are losing some areas that it's being used by multiple teams for practices versus making it a game field. One of the concerns that, you know, with the schools, they currently cross the street in a lot of cases for practices, games, and things of that nature. So that gives the school system a field on their side of the property versus coming across and playing at Legion Field right now.
And not only do they cross over for games, they also cross over for recess or PE or whatever they do during the day. I've come through there several times during the day when PE classes.
But everybody will be able to use the field. Residents, Park and Rec, school.
That's correct.
Right. It won't be restricted, right?
No, it wouldn't be restricted, but we wouldn't be able to use it till after school is out, obviously.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that this will free up the Legion field that they're currently using, correct?
It should, yes, sir.
Yes, that'll free that up, because there's a lot of restrictions to that field right now. But if you go with this, that opens up another Parks and Rec facility we have there.
And I have some other information as well.
And this could be a regulation field?
Yes, this definitely could be made a regulation field.
And if I might also, and that includes parking with that new field, because I know driving back that.
There
you've
is
got
no, that's a concern. There is not any parking. I think believe there's about 8 spots right there.
Well, I mean, it's dirt and.
Yeah,
it's
the only
flat,
parking is
kinda.
in this parking lot right here.
Right. But that little road that winds around to get back to the fields there is basically a 1-lane.
Yes, sir.
Little thing that
It's-
turns. So if you're going to
It's been paved recently in the last 2 years.
Right. But if you're going to add a lot of traffic heading back that away, you're going to, I think, have to do something behind the school with that area. So that is just, the field is 380, so any other work has not been included in that?
No, sir.
Okay. And what does the school system is going to be redoing Spotsy Middle next after Cortland. How does that fit in, or could we maybe tie into what they're doing and work it together? So any improvements to the back area with parking lot and whatnot might be, work together, and we could save some money that way too.
I know in speaking with Sean Hockaday, Sean was saying that they were going to do some parking improvements there, but he didn't expand on what it was. Yeah, it should be on the, if you slide.
We also had some other ideas if we didn't go these routes, just to throw them out there as well. We could convert Legion Stadium from Fescue to Bermuda. We could convert the Legion track from Fescue to Bermuda, which those are park facilities. And then another option would be to install athletic field lights on one of the fields at Patriot Park. To convert the Legion Stadium, it would cost about $58,000. There would be some irrigation and then putting in the Bermuda. To convert the Legion track, we would have to do irrigation, the turf conversion, and also fencing, because there's not fencing around that, so we'd want to make it more secure. And that would be about $115,000. Then eventually we would have to buy new turf mowing equipment if we continue to add Bermuda fields.
Anybody else have any questions, concerns, comments?
Is there a preference of the board as to what direction we move?
So just one question. So if this becomes a school field, does that go to the school CIP, or does that, how's that funded? So if you convert it behind the element or the middle school, is that a school CIP project, or is that a Parks and Rec project?
I was suggesting that we would take, I was suggesting that we would take the savings from the $517,000, do the $120,000 project over at Marshall Park, and take the remaining and do the $380,000 field behind the middle school, and we'd still have some money left over.
This is with the school board's approval.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to go to the school board since it's on school property.
I mean, as far as my opinion is with the board, I like the idea of going with putting the field behind the middle school. It gets the kids out the street. It gives us a regulation field for less money. You're talking about spending $500,000 to get something that's not even up to par. I don't, the way Marshall Park's set up right now, I personally, I like it. I like the smaller soccer field there. Parks and Rec tends to keep the smaller kids on that field. It looks like it's a good avenue for the younger soccer players. I'm not by no means a soccer expert at all, but it seems like it's being it gets used a lot throughout the summer there. This, like I say, this kind of would help the county citizens, I think, twofold. You get the kids at the street from the middle school. It gives us, Parks and Rec has access to a regulation soccer field, plus opens up the Legion Field area. I think that's at a cheaper price.
Board kind of in agreement with that? Yes, no, maybe. I think you're getting the majority of the nods, yes. So there's some direction. Do we need it in a motion? You want it in a motion?
If I have to move money from one project to another, Bonnie, would I need to come back to the board for a reappropriation?
Need to bring back that as a budget
I'll bring it back as a
amendment.
budget amendment and a reappropriation.
And we'll see if we can't save enough money to maybe do one of the Bermuda conversions.
Right.
Alrighty.
Just wanted to mention, it's kind of sparked a little bit of this interest anyway with Marshall Park in some ways. This is a Keswick Park proffer. This is not, we're not exactly sure when it's going to come on board, but it's, dirt's being moved over there for that project, for the construction of apartment buildings and so forth. But at some point, we'll pick up 3 rectangular athletic fields with Bermuda grass, a picnic pavilion, horseshoe pits, a restroom facility, and 2 tennis courts, trails, and the tennis courts will be lit. Keswick is just down the street from the area here, just about 2 miles away or a mile away. So just wanted to mention that to you.
So, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McClellan.
So one question with this proffer, because I actually saw this yesterday. Lots of soccer fields, lots of flat fields, but what I'm being asked for is baseball fields. Is this set, or can we at least get 1 or 2 baseball fields in here as well? And we've got, 1,000 Little Leaguers now, plus Parks and Rec baseball, so there's a big competition for fields.
What would take would probably be amendment to the proffer, and that would have to probably be.
They're coming here for that, so there's an opportunity. My understanding he's going to come back for an amendment to his proffer. There's an opportunity, though. My question is, would we be better if we had a couple of baseball fields and a soccer field or something like that, particularly as we've just put more soccer fields in?
We could definitely take on more baseball fields as well. I would think they could add 2 small baseball fields and 1 soccer field with that layout.
I guess that's my question. Would that be a better mix of fields across the county? Because I'm hearing more from baseball where shortage, there's competition for fields.
You'll be getting calls from soccer parents now.
Well, we just built a bazillion of them down there in the New Post, and, there's other fields out there. And,
Yeah, but.
Okay.
Well, how about this,
I would
Mr.
have-
Brooks? How about you professional, in your opinion, for the needs of the county and the kids? Would you prefer 1 baseball field, 2 soccer, 3 soccer?
I would
2
probably-
baseball, 1 soccer? I mean.
At this point, I'd probably pick 1 baseball and 2 soccer, just
Okay.
because of the wear and tear on soccer fields. What we're seeing is more people want Bermuda fields. Once you provide the better level of field, everybody wants the better level of field.
Okay.
We have fescue fields, and people don't want to practice on fescue. They want to practice on the Bermuda. So once you get field turf, then everybody's going to want field turf. So, sorry.
Okay.
Chair?
Go ahead.
So is a soccer field more expensive to build than a baseball, or depending on, would you make a Bermuda baseball? Because I know that Massaponax went to Bermuda for their baseball stadium, so did Riverbend, I believe, and I'm not sure how many of our high schools have Bermuda for their infields. What would you see as a baseball field? Would it be that dirt field like we have at
We would do a
Patriot?
dirt, yes, sir. We would do a dirt infield just for the maintenance, upkeep. A Bermuda infield would be much more costly to maintain staff-wise.
So is it cheaper for him to put a baseball stadium in, or them to put a baseball, not
let me-
stadium field,
yeah.
vice a soccer field?
Let me ask the park manager if he has an
Okay.
idea on.
Okay.
Typically, construction costs for baseball and soccer, it really is going to depend on the topography of the land. If you're looking at just converting a field that's already existing from fescue turf to a Bermuda turf, it's going to come down to a square footage cost is what it's going to be. Overall, what you have when you're dealing with a Bermuda field, as far as an infield for baseball, you're talking about a lot more of defining of edges, maintenance of the dirt to turf transitions. In the high school realm, you have a lot of volunteers, you have the teammates, you have the coaches that are volunteering a lot of that effort. From the staff, as far as if Parks and Rec were looking to do that, we typically lean more toward a skinned infield because we can drag that field, we can maintain those transition lip areas, and we can move on to the next field with relative ease. Does that help answer the question? So,
Yeah, I mean, we're not building these fields. These are proffered. So we're going to basically designate and try to get $3.5 million worth of park here.
That's correct. The construction is proffered.
So I mean, if by chance the baseball field's less expensive than a soccer field, maybe we get fencing or lighting or something associated with it to use up the proffer.
All right.
Real quick question.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Long-term CIP, next park in the growth area. I know that we're talking about in the courthouse area, but Massaponics, Route 2, that area, are we looking, or I know it's not in the CIP, but.
Yeah, there's nothing in the CIP. The next park would be the Nye River Park, probably be the next big project.
And
which is out by Nye River Middle School.
Right, well, and that's going to have baseball fields, soccer fields. I mean, it's going to be a larger one, right?
It's a little bit smaller than Patriot.
Okay.
But athletic field-wise, it would probably be comparable to Loriello.
Because if we have a shortage of baseball fields, which I know that we do, we need to start locating more of them up in the growth area, especially before all the growth comes, and then there's no place to put them. So, we don't want to have everything, down this way where you would have to drive simply because we didn't plan out for it.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? We can move on.
That's
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on any of the other CIP projects for either Parks and Rec or utility public works projects that you all are interested in? If not tonight, we can come back on the 13th with additional information. So if there's other projects that you may have questions on, if you let me know sometime this week, we can put that information together and come back again on March 13th with some other CIP discussions to include DSS.
All right. Thank all three of you.
And the Marshall Center.
All right. Mr. Chairman, board members, next we have budget work session review time, particularly for other funds being transportation fund, code compliance, EDO, the fire and EMS fund, and the utilities operating fund. Good evening, finance.
Yeah, let myself and Mr. Marshall read our little disclosures. I hereby disclose I have an interest in the budget transaction as a retired employee of the county. My disclosure is on file with the clerk and is available to the public for review. Mark, Amy, please record this disclosure in the minutes of this meeting as required by law. Mr. Marshall.
Right. I hereby disclose I have an interest in the budget transaction as an employee of the county. My disclosure is on file with the clerk and is available to the public for review. Mark and Amy, please record this disclosure in the minutes of this meeting as required by law.
Good evening, and may I please have the floor computer? I realize it's getting late, so we're going to go through this as quickly as possible. We spend a lot of time during the budget process talking to you and answering your questions related to the general fund, but I think we do need to at least report to you on one of the work sessions information about the other funds, those being the Economic Development Opportunities Fund, the Code Compliance Fund, Transportation, which we've already talked about a little bit in the prior work session, and then the Utilities Operating Fund. This is the same chart that you've seen in the county administrator's recommended budget and in his presentation. So the information that's here is not new on this slide. The first fund I want to talk about, and I'll give you an opportunity after each fund to ask questions about that fund if you have them. The first fund to talk about this evening is the Economic Development Opportunities Fund. The purpose of that fund, it accounts for expenditures of the county's Economic Development Authority. Primarily in that fund are the incentives that you have already approved and that we will owe in fiscal year 19. The funding sources are the rental of South Point property, and that rental source goes to pay for the debt service on the South Point property, the transfer from the general fund, all of which is used to pay for the incentives, and then the use of fund balance. The uses are for the incentives, mainly in this budget, the largest two of which are for Lidl and for the mall. Costs associated with the South Point property, debt service for the South Point property, legal and operating costs of the Economic Development Authority. The fiscal year 19 Economic Development Opportunities budget is $1.3 million. And the highlights, what makes up that $1.3 million is largely, as you can see here, the incentives, $1.2 million, and then $62,000 for the South Point building debt service. That is paid for by the general fund in fiscal year 19 because that space is going to be occupied by the registrar as well as the visitor center. Legal services associated with the EDA member stipends, and then the South Point building costs, which are property insurance and some utilities for the portion of the building that's not used by visitor center or the registrar. And so that's a quick overview of what is in the Economic Development Opportunities Fund for fiscal year 19. Do you have any questions about that fund?
One quick question.
Mr. Skinner?
Quick one, Bonnie. The rental of the South Point property, now that are we talking now that the registrar's office is going over there, we've lost the insurance portion of that, or?
Oh, no, I'm sorry if I messed that up. No, we still have and always have had to pay insurance on that building. What we have lost, if you want to say lost, is that space is no longer leased out. So we do not get rental income from outside entities. The general fund, however, is going to lease space, and it has been leasing space for years for the visitor center. That money goes to pay for the debt service associated with the building. Now, because the registrar is going to be there using that space, the general fund will pay for the registrar's space lease as well, all of which is combined to pay for the debt service on that building.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair. Question, so was it last year, before we got the incentives for the GM plant and all that, there was a reserve or a fund. Do we still have that as part of, and how much is that?
We do. We still have the Economic Opportunities Reserve, and that is $2 million. We are using some of that $2 million in the fiscal year 19 budget to pay for the non-tax-based incentives for certain groups that you've already approved incentives for. Those non-based incentives are things like an amount per job incentive. But the policy requires that if there is any available fund balance available at the end of the year, that will be used to reinstate that $2 million. So if you look in the budget, you're going to see a page where at the bottom we break down what is in that reserve.
Right.
There's still at the end of fiscal year 19, $2 million.
$2 million. And that's all that's there? Because we had more at one point, didn't we? We had more than $2 million. There was the fund, but there was money put aside for the GM plant,
Yes,
plus some additional?
We still do have the GM plant money.
How much is that?
And Mary's looking that up right now. It's a GP. Look up 10, GP 10. $3,235,000 is what remains in that project.
So just 3.2 million, and it's not really marked for anything right now, is it? It's for,
Well, was reserved to begin with for the GM plant.
Right.
And we still have pending the access road to the back 40 and the development plan for that property.
but it's available
You
at
bring
this point.
forward.
That's all I'm
Right.
saying, is right now, we
Yes.
have not, it is not assigned to a particular project. It is essentially in that EDO fund at this point, in a way.
No, the
No,
$2 million is outside of the EDO fund. That's
Right.
in a reserve within the general fund.
Okay.
In the reserve for economic opportunities.
Right.
Additionally, there is $3.2 million that's currently sitting in the capital projects fund reserved for this GM plant, which, as Mark was explaining, may be used for something else.
Right,
But-
so
but
we're
will
done
not-
with the GM plant, but it may be used for something else in support of that area, or
Yes.
whatever else that we choose.
Yes, and when the board set aside that funding a number of years ago, fiscal year 16, we understood at that time that nothing was to be done with that money without coming back to the board
Right,
first.
right. Okay, I just want to know what was left in that fund. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next fund. Next fund is Code Compliance Fund, and in this fund are expenses related to the building and zoning offices. It accounts for revenue and expenditures related to enforcement of federal, state, and local laws for building, zoning, and environmental engineering. It is funded by various fees, and there is, of course, the fee schedule that you all have approved. And nothing in the fiscal year 19 budget varies from the fees that you've already approved. We are not assuming any fee increases for beyond what you've already approved for fiscal year 19. It is also funded by a transfer from the general fund for what are considered core and basic services that even outside of the reviews and the fees would be required to be done, and that's why the general fund pays for those. Also, the use of the code compliance fund balance. This continues to be the case where we are funding ongoing expenditures with use of the code compliance fund balance. The uses of the funds are, again, for building and zoning staff and for the operating costs of those two entities. The total recommended budget for code compliance in fiscal year 19 is $4.3 million. That funds 36 full-time equivalents, and those 36 include the conversion of a part-time clerk to full-time in fiscal year 19, and one new commercial and residential plans reviewer to help with workloads associated with permit applications and plan reviews that are up 20% when compared to activity in recent years. And you might remember, that might sound familiar to you because at the beginning, towards the beginning of fiscal year 18, the building officer came to you and asked that additional overtime funding be added in fiscal year 18 because the volume of permit reviews and application reviews was quite a bit higher than expected. That is continuing to occur in fiscal year 18, and it's expected to continue to occur in fiscal year 19, and that's why this position is needed. I will note that it is fully funded through an increase in fee revenue, and when I say that, again, it is not an increase in the rates. It is an increase from the volume of permits being reviewed and accepted. Also included is a $200,000 use of fund balance to transfer to the general fund related to software upgrade project that is happening in the CIP. Use of $5,000 from accumulated stormwater management revenue for the stormwater management plan, and one aspect of that plan is mussel farming, which you heard about in last year's budget, and as I understand it, is expected to begin in fiscal year 18. There's a $3,000 increase in funding to the Tri-County Soil and Water Conservation District, and a $334,000 OPEB reserve. And that is the brief overview of the Code Compliance Fund, if you have questions about that.
Mr. Yakubov.
That OPEB fund is their OPEB fund, which is separate from the county's OPEB fund.
Correct.
Okay.
We have, for a number of years, been setting aside the annual required contribution for the smaller funds, all funds other than the general fund, and certainly the general fund is the largest.
Anybody else? Move on.
Thank you. The Transportation Fund, you obviously know what that is. We've talked about it a number of times. The purpose is to address transportation concerns in the county, and we do that through a number of ways. Of course, this fund pays for the debt service associated with capital projects. It pays for the Fred bus service and pays for a number of transportation-related positions. And the sources of the funding, the largest is the fuel tax. Also in this fund is where we have the special taxes related to special service districts, where we collect a special tax in 4 areas of the county, special real estate tax, and that tax goes to fund the debt service on transportation projects within those 4 districts. We have a transfer of $700,000 in ongoing funding from the general fund to the transportation fund. You'll recall that that was started a couple of years ago and is continuing in fiscal year 19. We do also have a transfer of $174,000 from the capital projects fund to the transportation fund. Again, for many years now, there is no transfer of the vehicle license fees from the general fund to the transportation fund in fiscal year 19. Fiscal year 19 continues to use the fund balance to fund the transportation fund balance to fund transportation expenditures. Specifically, I wanted to note that in fiscal year 19's budget, we have assumed the use of $673,000 in accumulated and reserved set-asides from the 4 service districts as a source of funding for fiscal year 19. And when I say that, I want to be clear that the set-asides are what was approved when each of the 4 service districts were approved to be set aside from local sales, meals, property, personal property taxes. And the set-asides are not the revenue that's generated from the special tax rate that is applied to each of those service districts that's used to pay the debt service. I think I had a question earlier this week related to that, and I wanted to make that clear. It's not, what we're doing is not trying to eliminate that special tax. We are trying to eliminate the 10% set aside. I'm going to get to more of that in a second. That 10% was set aside and transferred to the transportation fund for a number of years, many years ago. But since fiscal year 11, that money was needed to balance the general fund budget and has been maintained within the general fund budget and not transferred to transportation. The county administrator, at staff's request, is recommending within his budget that the set-aside process be eliminated. And this is the 10% set-asides. The tracking of such is a manual process performed primarily by the Commissioner's Office and the Treasurer's Office, but which the Finance Department spends time on as well. The 10% set-aside equates to about $760,000 a year. With the base $700,000 transfer to the transportation fund that's already in the budget, along with what in the very near future will be a multi-million-dollar additional transfer, we are essentially using those set-asides. We might not be calling it that, but we are essentially using those. It seems somewhat counterproductive to continue to track these set-asides when the end goal of funding transportation costs can otherwise be tallied and met. So the county administrator is joined by the commissioner, the treasurer, and the finance staff to respectfully request that the set-aside process be eliminated. The uses of, actually I already mentioned this, the uses of the sources of funding within the transportation fund are for staff, debt service, the Fred bus service, and for the VRE and PRTC annual subsidies. There is no new transportation staff planned for fiscal year 19. The recommended transportation budget in fiscal year 19 is $8.2 million. That includes about a $500,000 increase in debt serviced based on new transportation debt being issued for projects in fiscal year 19. It also includes $45,800 for the OPEB reserve. This is not new. This is the ongoing OPEB reserve for this fund. And then it does include about a $120,000 increase in subsidies to VRE and PRTC paid for with the fuel tax. Oh, I should note that the subsidies increased due to an increase in VRE and PRTC costs, but are based on our proportionate share of ridership.
Mr. Chair, question for you real quick.
Yes.
On the transportation, I know this has been an issue that comes up quite a bit about funding it. We talked about impact fees and stuff for some of our rezonings. Have we ever looked at possibly using impact fees to fund this? Well, how about, can we talk about that at a later date, that potentially, we talked about it, I think Mr. Chair, I think you're going to come back, talk SSDs, impact fees and stuff like that, but, you know, what do we think we could potentially generate on an impact fee, and could we use that across the county for road projects, if it's a countywide impact fee or something like that? Because that potentially could address the shortages we have every year, if we could take a look at that.
Right. We can bring back information on the alternative, Mr. O'Gallagher.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Just on those same lines, would you make sure that we understand, just like with what SSD can be used for, what an impact fee can be used for, designated area?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And the last slide, you saw this the last time, and this is exactly what you're talking about. The out-year expected need for transfer from the general fund to support transportation. And this is driven by the costs that I talked about before. The PRTC subsidies, the VRE costs, the Fred bus service costs, but it's largely driven by the expected increase in debt service from the projects that are in the CIP for transportation. We have about $37 million planned over the next 5 years, and that is really driving these costs upwards, and the result is a need for additional funding from the general fund to support transportation.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Quick question. And that's all from the bond referendum, the new stuff in the 5-year. So those are geo bonds. That's the cheapest money we can get.
Yes, there, over the 5-year period, there's $37 million in projects planned. $1.4 million is planned from proffers, and the rest is primarily from bonds.
That were approved in November 2014. So they are.
Yes.
Right. So, but we do have proffers that are sitting out there that, I mean, that only takes into account proffers that we've received, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, there is a potential, I think it was Heritage Woods was 19 million. But again, whenever it gets built, then you have to bring in the money. So you
That's
don't
right.
obviously plan on it. And then transportation bonds are how long are they for?
We issue these for 20 years.
Okay. So we should be coming up on paying off some of these. Not these, but ones that we started when we started doing this in the early 2000s, shortly. But we're,
The first debt? I think we issued the first debt in 2006, after the 2005 referendum. So.
8 years, but we're getting there. Okay.
We're getting there.
I guess so, yes. We'll give you that.
Thank you.
So before we leave the transportation section, I did want to get your thoughts on the elimination of the set-asides. I'm not really sure that there's going to be a spot for us to come back and address this at a later date. So if you have any thoughts on that.
Mr. Chair, do you need a motion from the board for that, or just a head nod? What do you need?
Well, that's actually a legal opinion request that we've put into the county attorney's office, and I know that he and his staff are working hard on that. I don't see the harm in a vote.
Would a motion relieve him from having to answer the question, Carl?
Yeah, the question is whether or not, adopting that change in policy as part of the budget would be sufficient, or if there's a need for a separate motion. I think a separate motion may cure all of that and take care of that issue.
I'll make a motion that we no longer track the set-aside.
All right, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Ross that we no longer track the set-aside. Any discussion? Mr. Yakubowski.
Just to make the point that we don't track it, but we're still using it.
Correct.
So it's just, so you guys don't have to find where it comes from, but we're still going to spend it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? All right, Mr. Yakubowski.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Trappe.
Aye.
And Chair's aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just so you know, somewhere the treasurer and the commissioner are very happy.
Very happy.
Next fund, this is a very easy one, the Fire and EMS Service Fee Fund. This fund was established in fiscal year 2006 to track fire and EMS revenue recovery funds. This is the process of obtaining reimbursement for medically necessary ambulance transports. In fiscal year 2019, we're expecting to receive $2.6 million in revenue associated with those transports, and all $2.6 million of that is transferred from this fund to the general fund to support certain fire and rescue positions, per diems, billing fees, training, and increased medical operating supply costs previously matched to this revenue recovery by the board. So there's a certain list of items that are funded with this. And that's the only slide for this fund, so if you have any questions.
I think we can move on.
Thank you. The Utilities Operating Fund, you hear a lot about this, particularly when it's time to set rates. This is a self-supporting enterprise fund used to account for operations of the public water and sewer system. The funding source, all of this is funded through user fees and debt service and administrative fees. There is no tax support associated with this. We also do get a small amount of subsidies for certain bonds that we issued in 2010, and that is factored into the revenue as well. That revenue is used to fund 125 full-time equivalent positions. Those employees man 3 wastewater treatment facilities that have a 13.7 million gallons per day capacity, 2 water treatment facilities having a 21 million gallons per day capacity, 3 reservoirs with $5.6 billion gallon volume.
Dollars.
Yeah, dollars, always dollars. We maintain more than 1,200 miles of water and sewer mains and laterals, 49 sewage pump stations, the composting operation. There's an engineering and planning review group, a lab services operation, and this operation is 365 days per year. The fiscal year 19 budget for this operation is $32.3 million. There are no rate and fee increases beyond what you've already approved planned in the budget. The highlights of this budget include a $1.4 million overall increase relative to the fiscal year 18 budget, and that is accounted for with these items here. There's $404,000 for added positions. It's 4 new added positions, and I need to note that that includes the equipment associated with the positions as well. And in some instances, it's a significant amount. That's why the cost is a total of $404,000. There's a new electrician for one of the plants, a new construction technician for the line location division due to increasing number of water and sewer construction projects, and new water and sewer line installations associated with development. There are also 2 new utilities field crew workers for valve maintenance and inspection. There's $445,000 added for various plant machinery and equipment. $346,000 is included for the, is added for the OPEB reserve for utilities operating. And then just like on the general fund side, where we made some adjustments related to the lapse and turnover of staffing, there's a $200,000 reduction in costs planned in fiscal year 19 associated with the utilities staff savings. Overall, the OPEB reserve for this fund is $1.1 million, and I'm pleased to report that for yet another year, we are able to cash fund all of the CIP projects for the Utilities Capital Projects Fund. That's a significant savings by not having to borrow for those. And the last time we had to borrow new money for projects for utilities was in 2010. So we've been cash funding those projects, and there have been a lot of projects. since 2010. That's not going to go on forever. We have been using down the utilities fund balance, just so I don't set up false expectations. We have been drawing down the utilities fund balance, and I do expect that in fiscal year 2020, we will have to start borrowing again for those capital projects.
Any questions on that?
I'm sorry, any questions on that?
Comments? Guess not.
Thank you. And then our usual closing slide. These are the items that are coming up. Since I've read these to you a number of times, I'll just let you enjoy them for yourself here. I do have one matter of housekeeping, though, before at least our session ends. We've advertised the equalized and 85-cent real estate tax rate in yesterday's Freelance Star. We're going to have to advertise 7 days in advance of the public hearing, at least 7 days in advance of the public hearing, for all other tax rates, including the personal property tax rate. And I know there's been the discussion about whether or not we want to start thinking about the 100% or the 100% versus the 50% as the basis for the personal property taxation. And if we want to change that, we're going to need to account for that in our advertisement. So I kind of need to get the pulse of the board, if not at tonight's meeting, no later than March 13th, as to how you want to proceed with that for calendar year 2018 tax rates.
Dr. Trampy?
If I recall, Mr. Ross, it was an email that you initiated, but as I recall, Ms. Williams suggested that it wasn't going to be possible this current budget year to go to taxing 100%.
Mr. That's my understanding. And I asked Debbie if she would look into it. She wasn't sure if the computer system that she has would allow for that or not. So just to save the hassle, I'm okay with that if the rest of the board is waiting until next year to even see if we can do that. I do think standardizing the rates, I know that different counties do things differently, and it's really hard to standardize, but I think with ours, with the 50% assessed value, our tax rate on personal property seems really high. It's never said in that chart that, you know, it probably is, but in the small print, that it's 50% of assessed value. So in the long run, I'd still like to look at that, but I'm fine with not doing it this year.
Okay, thank you. And that's it for our presentation, so thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work.
Fine, Mary, thank you. Should bring us to closed session, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, this is your resolution to adjourn into closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose or the disposition of publicly held real property, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining positioning or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically discussion of real property in the Battlefield District. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business's or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community, specifically healthcare industry. And whereas Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically regarding local taxation. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2, 3711A, 3, 5, and 8, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
So moved.
Mr. Yakupowski.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Trampy.
Aye.
Chair's aye.
Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2, 3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to convene in the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Yakupowski.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Trampy.
Aye.
Chair's aye.
Mr. Chair, at this point, I would move, or I'd ask respectfully to request a motion to advertise a public hearing to consider amendments to the county code to reduce the penalty on delinquent meals taxes, to bring it in line with state code, and to bring the assessment of interest on those delinquencies within the county code. I have a copy here of the notice and the draft changes for Amy.
Can we get a motion on it?
So moved.
All right, I'll give it to Mr. Yakubowski. Mr. Yakubowski.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Travi.
Aye.
Chair, aye. Don't know. Motion to get out of here?
Aye.
All ayes.
Aye.
Say aye.